Chapter 2195. Does it mean that as long as I accept the modification and don't go crazy, it's considered a success? That's not the first time. Don't naively think that one successful modification is the end. That's just the beginning. Madwa Shinji's tone carried a hint of warning, but also a hint of pride. Every modification is a test of life and death. Every modification will make you hover between rationality and madness. Every modification will make you understand the meaning of life anew. Looks exciting, Bifla said, rubbing his chin. How many times have you modified? Chun looked at Mado Shinji curiously. 5 times. All succeeded. I didn't turn into a monster, or lose my rationality. Then when will our modification begin? Tomorrow, you'll receive your first modification. Alright, looks like I should look forward to tomorrow. That's the furnace in front. The place for the modification experiment. Mado Shinji pointed at a metal door in front. Can't we go in? Yes. Mado Shinji led the way. After opening the door, Chun and Bifla felt a wave of heat as they left. They actually used underground magma to form a magma pool about 20 meters in diameter in this room. In the center of the pool was a container soaked in magma. The container was transparent glass, with a small part exposed outside the magma pool. There was a person soaking in the container. A few people were waiting at the edge of the magma pool. Is that a modification experiment? Chin asked. Yes. I thought it was cooking. Mado Shinji glanced at Chin. Are you really an assassin? Is there a problem? I've never seen an assassin who likes to bicker so much. Have you seen many assassins? No, it's my first time seeing a legendary assassin. I think he looks more like one. It's always like that in movies. Talking less doesn't mean you're an assassin. Talking more doesn't mean you're not an assassin. Just then, the person soaking in the container suddenly opened his eyes and began to struggle violently. He tried to smash open the container, but the glass container seemed to be unimaginably tough. The liquid in the container also absorbed his beating. Outside, Chun and the others couldn't even hear the sound of the people inside the container hammering. He seems to be in pain. Are you not letting him out? This process is normal. Humans are unable to withstand the power extracted from the magma, so special potions are needed to suppress it. Even so, it will still cause a huge impact on the human body and mentality. If one can persist, then it will be considered a success. What if I don't make it? Falling into madness will also turn you into a monster. You're talking about injecting the energy extracted from the magma into a person's body. Let's not talk about whether it's possible. Even if it's possible, can it turn a person into a monster? What turns people into monsters isn't the power extracted from the magma, but the special potions used to suppress it. Madwa paused, then added, if this special potion is not used, the person will definitely die. But if it is used, there is a possibility of success. What are the chances of success? Not necessarily. Everyone's physique is different. Their endurance and willpower are also different, so the probability is different. Give me an average. Between 40% to 60%. At that moment, the container opened. The person soaked in it immediately rushed out of the container, knelt on the ground and vomited. The surrounding staff hurried forward, wanting to help the person up. But Madwa, who was standing at the edge, immediately shouted, "Everyone step back." When the surrounding staff heard Madwa's words, most of them were stunned for a moment, but they still obeyed Madwa's order and retreated to the side. Madwa clearly noticed the abnormality of the person undergoing the transformation experiment. He was roaring like a wild beast. Suddenly he raised his head. Chun and Bifla noticed that his face had become slightly distorted. The person glared fiercely at Madwa, Chun and Bifla in front of him. Chun and Bifla seemed to have discussed it before, and both took a step back. He looks a little scary, Miss Madwa. I'll leave him to you. Madwa Shinji did not have any objections and took a step forward. Ningku, calm down, you still have a chance. Don't give up on yourself. What responded to Madwa Shinji was a hysterical roar from Ningku. Fur began to grow on Ningku's body. At the same time, he pounced towards Madwa. Madwa immediately went up to meet him. First, she avoided Ningku's attack, and at the same time, she hit him hard in the abdomen. Ningku rolled a few times on the ground and stood up unscathed. Chun and Bifla stood outside the battle circle to watch the show, and they were making sarcastic remarks while commenting. Her fighting skills are so amateur. Apart from her outstanding physical strength, her performance looks very bad. Their voices were neither loud nor soft, but it was enough for Madwa to hear. Madwa was so angry that she was about to vomit blood. If Ninka hadn't given her great pressure, she would probably have turned around and punched them a few times. But Chun and Bifla obviously did not suppress their cold-blooded nature. He was still talking incessantly. The more Madwa listened, the angrier she became. Ningku, who had fallen into madness, was already hopeless. And Madwa could not get rid of Ningku in a short time. Of course, there was another very important reason. Madwa Shinji showed some mercy. After all, they were once companions. And the degree of Ningku's mutation was not very big. Madwa still had some hope that Ningku could regain his sanity. However, the two sides fought for a while, but still, no one could do anything to the other. After fighting for 10 minutes, Madwa repelled Ningku with one blow. She also took a few steps back to regroup. Madwa looked at Chun and Bifla. Since you think I didn't perform well, then let me see what you can do. Madwa suddenly took 2 steps back. At the same time, she reached out and pushed Chun and Bifla's back. The two stumbled in front of Ningku. At this time Ningku also attacked the two. Bifla suddenly reached out and slashed forward. Ningku's neck was instantly cut open, and blood splattered all over Bifla. Under Madwa's stunned gaze, Ningku's lifeless body slowly fell to the ground. Madwa looked at Bifla in a daze. How did you do it? Chapter 2196. See, this is the difference between a killer and a regular person. Grinning, Chun Zhao put his hand on Mato Shinji's shoulder. Mato Shinji's expression darkened. She flung Chun Zhao's arm away, but Bifla had easily killed Nink, who'd gone mad. It still made Madwa Shinji feel a little uncomfortable. She wasn't sad about Nink's death. To Nink, death was a form of release. She just felt that even after 5 modifications, she still couldn't compare to a newbie. Was there really such a huge difference between a professional killer and a regular person like her? Madwa Xing knew her own strength and ability. After the modifications, she already had abilities far beyond a regular person. But Bifla had crushed her in a strange way. Madwa Shinji turned and left. Chun Zhao and Bifla still followed her. Madwa Shinji felt a sense of danger. This was her only home. Even if Ruik Des was using her, she didn't feel anything. At least here, someone needed her. She could also show her value. But the appearance of these two killers made her feel like she was about to be eliminated. She felt like she was about to be eliminated. Without a doubt, there was a fundamental difference between a regular person and a killer. For example, if it was the Mato Shinji from a year ago, she definitely wouldn't be able to fight against the crazy Nink. But Bifla had ended the battle in the blink of an eye. If the two could be like her and go through 3, 4 times, no, maybe they only needed 1 successful modification experiment. They would surpass her in all aspects. Would she still have any value then? Are all assassins like you? No, we're the best killers, Bifla said proudly. Then what's the difference between us and regular killers? Mato Shinji asked. Just like the difference between you and regular people, Bifla said. Of course, Mato Shinji knew how big the difference was between her and regular people. Mato Shinji brought Chun Zhao and Bifla around the underground palace a few times. Finally, she brought them to their residence. This was a residential area, even though it was underground. Although it was underground, there were some modern facilities that wouldn't make people uncomfortable. Chun Zhao and Bifla were placed in the same room. Chun Zhao drew a line in the room. Don't cross this line, especially when I'm asleep, or I'll kill you. 10 centimeters more on your side, Bifla said coldly. At the same time, he redivided the room. I think you're the one who's been drinking too much. Chun Zhao added another line. It's about time. It's not almost the same. You have more, and I have less. Chun Zhao didn't like staying in the same room with men. Bifla didn't like it either. Both of them were the type of people who were particularly strong. They would not give in to the other party. You want to fight? Do you think I'll be afraid of you? At this moment the door was pushed open. Mato Shinji looked at the messy room. What are you doing? I want to change rooms, Bifla said straightforwardly. I also want to change rooms. I'll leave this room to him. We didn't change rooms. You'd better behave yourselves. Don't cause trouble here. Ma Duo XNG said coldly, then turned around and left the room. Chen Zhao glanced at Bifla, and also left the room. He pushed open the opposite door. When the two people inside saw Chen Zhao come in, they were both stunned. Hi, I'm new here. My room is opposite. Can I change rooms with you? Get out, kid. Hearing that Chen Zhao was new, the two acted like seniors, not giving him any face at all. 3 minutes later, the two dragged their luggage out with swollen noses and noses. As soon as they reached the door, the other two also dragged their luggage out. What happened? Don't mention it. A asterisk shoal came, and wants to change rooms with us. Us too. Bang bang. Are you asleep? Idiot, don't knock on the wall so hard. I don't want to change rooms. What's Ruik Des's goal? I don't know. Is it related to the Battle of Holy Glory? This underground base clearly took some time to build. It wasn't specially prepared for the Battle of Holy Glory. Also, his other nickname is Immortal Gan Ling. He's famous in Eastern Europe, but he doesn't have any criminal records, so no one wants him. Fine. Chen Zhao shrugged. What do you plan to do with this guy? If he's not that annoying, he'll leave after the game ends. If he makes me annoyed, I'll kill him after the game ends. What's your standard of annoyance? You're the standard, Bifla said. Chen Zhao wanted to punch through the wall and pull Bifla over. But after thinking carefully, he gave up on the idea. After all, changing rooms was too troublesome. He'd already done it once. If he did it again, it might arouse Ruik Des's suspicions. Oh, when's the next Battle of Holy Glory? 3 days later. That means we only have 3 days. Maybe not 3 days. Why? Maybe you'll be exposed tomorrow. Even if you're exposed, I won't. As long as I don't use my real power, Ruik Des won't notice. Chen Zhao and Bifla chatted for the whole night. Both of them were the kind of people who were extremely poor and bored. Plus, they were full of energy. They couldn't stay idle for a few days. The next day, Chen Zhao and Bifla were woken up. After breakfast, the two of them were called to Ruik Des. Mato Shinji was in the room too. I heard you guys killed the crazy Ning with one move yesterday. Not us, Bifla said matter-of-factly. Ruik Des looked at Chen Zhao. What about you? How strong are you compared to him? Not weaker than him, Chen Zhao said, glancing at Bifla provocatively. Both of you are excellent candidates. Ruik Dales had wanted to say excellent test subjects, but he didn't say anything. However, considering the two's state of mind, he changed his words. With your abilities, the first modification experiment should be fine. Then let's begin. I can't wait to become stronger. Very good, but before that you better stay calm. The calmer the better. Our training has made us good at controlling our emotions. That's great. Let's begin. Who's first? Him. Chen Zhao and Bifla said at the same time. Chapter 2197. Ruik Des wasn't asking for their opinion. He pointed at Chen Zhao and said, You first. Chen Zhao was helpless. He could only drag his clothes and walk toward the container. He stepped into the container, and the liquid immediately wrapped around him. From a medical analysis, the potion had strong skin irritation. Chen Zhao felt it, and analyzed the components of the potion at the same time. If it was a simple mutation potion, Chen Zhao knew how to make it. It wasn't any special or complicated potion. However, the components of the potion in this container were more complicated. For a layman, it was almost impossible to analyze the components. Mato Shinji stood at the side and looked at Chen Zhao, who was soaking in the container, with a complicated expression. Ruik Des crossed his arms in front of his chest. His expression couldn't be seen. Bifla found a seat at the side and sat down. Mato Shinji glanced at Bifla. Bifla was even more relaxed than Ruik Des. It was as if he was a complete stranger soaking in the container. Aren't you worried at all? Worried about what? Bifla said unconcerned. Even though the first experiment isn't very risky, it's still dangerous. Aren't you worried that something will happen to him? If something happens to him, I'll be happy to see it. Isn't he your friend? When did you have this misunderstanding? We're not friends. Mato Shinji couldn't help but be confused. What was Chen Zhao's relationship with Baifla? 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes. At first, Mato Shinji looked at the time every 10 minutes. Later on, she looked at the time every minute. The longer Chen Zhao soaked in the container, the more impatient she became. 30 minutes. This was the record she'd once set. The potion in the container had a terrifying corrosive effect. Both the body and the mind were corroded. The longer one persisted, the more medicinal potency one absorbed, the stronger the individual's strength would be, and the stronger the corrosion would be. Usually, 10 minutes was a normal person's limit. After this time, unpredictable changes might happen. After 20 minutes, there would be an extremely strong adverse reaction. If one didn't come out within 30 minutes, their body might mutate, and their mind might become twisted. But Chen Zhao had already soaked in the container for 40 minutes, and there was no reaction at all. Just like the last time when Ningke was soaked in the container for more than 20 minutes. He had an extremely strong reaction, and even lost control. Right now, Chen Zhao seemed to be asleep. Chen Zhao, that's enough. Baifla's voice rang in his ears. Chen Zhao suddenly opened his eyes, and looked at the people outside the container. Then, Chen Zhao gestured at the container, gesturing for everyone to open the lid. After the container was opened, Chen Zhao jumped out. Loic Des and Mato Singe looked at the wet display. Neither of them avoided the completely naked Chen Zhao. Of course, Chen Zhao didn't really care. How do you feel? Ruic Des looked like he was admiring his own work. In fact, he did treat Chen Zhao as his own work. Chen Zhao looked at his body, and then shook his head. I don't know. I don't feel anything special. Ruic Des rubbed his chin, and fell into deep thought. Was the physique of a professional assassin really that much stronger than that of an ordinary person? After staying in the container for 40 minutes, Chen Zhao had almost absorbed all the potion's power. But his body didn't have any negative reactions. Ruic thought for a while, then raised his palm, and a black light burst forth from his palm. The black light dissipated before it could reach Chen Zhao. Chen Zhao reacted quickly. He did a backflip and rolled several meters away. He'd almost been exposed. Chen Zhao clutched his chest, his expression somewhat pained. What are you doing? Chen Zhao pretended to be angry at Ruic Des. You're not bad. I'm looking forward to the second one now. Ruic Des turned to Baifla. Don't lose to your partner. I won't lose to him. Baifla glanced at Chen Zhao, his eyes filled with provocation. Just like Chen Zhao, Baifla stayed in the container. He didn't come out until all the potion's power was absorbed. Mato Singe realized that Chen Zhao was dozing off on the ground, just like Baifla. He didn't care if Baifla was in danger in the container. Just like Chen Zhao, Baifla walked out of the container unscathed. I stayed 1 minute longer than him. The first thing Baifla said was that he'd defeated Chen Zhao. Chen Zhao rolled his eyes. After most of the potion's power is absorbed, it's basically like diving. You might as well dive for 10 more minutes. That's still a win. Fine, you win, okay? Chen Zhao didn't argue. There was nothing to argue with anyway. Looks like you're both stable. Practice your transformations in the next 2 days. The day after tomorrow, I'll arrange your first mission for you. How? You two are about the same level. You can spar with each other. Remember, don't be too heavy-handed. After all, you're rare candidates. With that, Ruic Des turned and left. Only Chen Zhao, Baifla and Mato Singe were left. Baifla looked at Chen Zhao. How about it? Do you want to compete with our current power? What Baifla was implying was that Chen Zhao shouldn't use his own strength and suppress it to the level he'd just displayed. I'll fight you to the end. Actually, there was no way to distinguish one's status in this battle. Even though they'd suppressed their strength, their levels were still there. Physique, willpower, and resistance couldn't be suppressed. Nevertheless, Mato Singe was still curious about how much Chen Zhao and Baifla had improved after the modification experiment. Before the modification, Chen Zhao and Baifla were already terrifyingly strong. After the first modification, their strength would probably increase by leaps and bounds too. Mato Singe brought Chen Zhao and Baifla to a wide indoor training field. Before Mato Singe could give the order, Chen Zhao and Baifla attacked each other at the same time. Their faces were hit at the same time, and they took 2 steps back. Does it hurt? Baifla touched his cheek. What do you think? Chen Zhao and Bifla both had extremely rich combat experience. In particular, Chen Zhao's close-range combat was extremely proficient. In comparison, Bifla's close-range combat was slightly lacking. But with hundreds of years of experience, he could continuously improve himself in battle. Mobile version of the fastest.d website. Chapter 2198. Mato Shinji's eyes almost popped out. Chen Zhao and Bifla had only undergone the first modification experiment. However, the combat power they had displayed already made Mato Shinji feel very guilty. Mato Shinji clenched her fists and stared at the two people in the middle. Let's not talk about the physiques they displayed. At the very least, they were much more powerful than Mato Shinji. However, after 10 minutes, the two stopped at the same time. There was no point in continuing. It was like two boxing champions were scratching each other's itches. Would they be able to determine the victor with such a method? Mato Shinji frowned. She felt that the two's tacit agreement from the start to the end made her feel strange. But she couldn't tell what was going on with this strange feeling. Don't you two need to familiarize yourself with your powers? Mato Shinji asked. We're already familiar with each other. We don't need to. Both of them were so conceited and proud. How about I spar with you too? Mato Shinji made up her mind to test how powerful the two were. Not interested. Bifla rejected Mato Shinji's challenge with a cold expression. Then, Mato looked at Chen Zhao. How about you tell us your story? If it's interesting enough, I'll spar with you. My past. It's not a secret. Many people here know about it. If you're nosy enough, you can get a more detailed story from others. It's more interesting to hear it from the person involved. At least, I hope it's interesting. Nothing much. I fell in love with a love scammer. And after that scammer married me, he bought a lot of accident insurance for me. The rest of the story wasn't too surprising. You should be able to guess that he planned an accident for me. When I was about to die, I met Mr. Sanders. Mato Shinji's eyes sparkled with admiration at the mention of Reich Dose. Mr. Des saved me and made a deal with me. He threatened you and made you obey him. Hearing Chen Zhao's words, Mato Shinji's face turned red in anger. Mr. Des isn't as despicable as you say. He's more noble than anyone else. Chen Zhao rolled his eyes. To him, she was just a brainless fan who had been fooled by the facade. You call experimenting on living people noble? Have you misunderstood the definition of nobility? He's never forced you, Mato Shinji argued. Maybe that swindler was arranged by him. Nonsense. Mato Shinji was furious. She raised her fist and swung it at Chen Zhao. Chuckling, Chen Zhao took a step back and dodged Mato Shinji's punch. Destroying the faith of others is a very immoral thing to do, Bifla said calmly. Mato Shinji turned to look at Bifla fiercely. You have the same idea as him? No, he's just teasing you. I know. Mato Shinji was still angry. Mr. Des is not as despicable as he said. Just based on Ruik Des's ability and the time cost. If he really needs you to work for him, he doesn't need to go through so much trouble. Humph. Mato Shinji snorted and turned to leave. Bifla was giving an explanation. However, this explanation did not satisfy her. To Mato Shinji, Ruik Des was a god in her heart. When she needed help the most, God did not help her. It was Ruik Des who had helped her. Therefore, she would not allow anyone to insult Ruik Des. She would not allow anyone to tarnish her faith. At that moment, Mato Shinji saw Ruik Des in the laboratory. He was making some complicated magic potions. Mato Shinji pushed open the lab door. Ruik Des did not raise his head. Instead, he continued with his work. Mato, I can feel that your mind is very active. What happened? Mr. Des, those two guys are much stronger than normal people, but they are not loyal to you. They have no respect for you at all. I don't need respect, Ruik Des said calmly. I don't need anyone's loyalty. I said that this is a deal, just like the deal with you. Even if you say that, you can't change my decision. Mr. Des, I will always be loyal to you. I don't need it. I said that this is a deal. Mr. Des, do you want them to carry out the mission tomorrow? Yes. Is there a problem? Please allow me to follow them. After all, they might betray me. You can't watch them. If they want to betray you, you won't be able to stop them. You might even lose your life. I'm not afraid. As long as I can do something for Mr. Des, I'm willing to do anything. Okay, you don't have to worry about them. Do your own thing. Mr. Des, I still want to watch them. Ruik Des finally stopped his work and looked up at Mato Shinji. After thinking for a while, Ruik Des finally said, "Alright, keep this bottle of potion on you. It can increase your strength tenfold. And it has already lasted for more than an hour. If you use this bottle of potion, it's best to return here within an hour. Otherwise you'll definitely die. Mr. Des, I'll keep a close eye on them." Mato Shinji hesitated for a while before saying, "Mr. Des, those two are slandering you. The Asian called Chen Zhao said that you were the one who arranged the scammer. I don't need to do that. You're not worth my effort," Ruik Des replied. Ruik Des replied, though his reply was even harsher than Bifla's earlier words. However, Mato Shinji felt satisfied. "Mr. Des, what mission do you want them to carry out tomorrow?" "Stealing corpses," Ruik Des replied. "You can give this mission to me or someone more loyal." "Why do you want them to do it?" "Because the corpses they want to steal don't belong to ordinary people. The corpses are all guarded by spiritualists like me. You're not bad, but you can't carry out this mission yet. Comparatively, as killers, they're more suitable for this mission. They know how to hide and escape. Okay, you can leave now. Don't disturb my experiment." Ruik Des once again focused on his work. Mobile version of the fastest.d website. Chapter 2199. The next day, Chen Zhao and Bifla were both called to Rikdos. Of course, Mato Shinji was there too. "The reason I called the three of you here today is to ask you to do something for me." Rikdos glanced at Mato Shinji, even though she was actually monitoring Chen Zhao and Bifla. Of course, he couldn't say that in front of them. Nominally, she was carrying out the mission with them. "I need some corpses. You three need to help me get some corpses." "They shouldn't be corpses lying in the morgue, right?" Bifla asked. "That's right. When these corpses were alive, they were special people just like me." Bifla didn't deny it. "Their corpses won't be left in the morgue either. There will be special people guarding them. So you're sending us to our deaths? We've been strengthened, but that doesn't mean we can fight against people like you," Chen Zhao said, pretending to be angry. "First of all, the ones who will guard the corpses won't be strong, and it's impossible for them to be at my level. Therefore, you guys don't have to worry. The average spiritualists might not be stronger than you guys. Actually, you guys are considered superhumans now. If you guys were in the supernatural world, you guys would be considered enhancers. Coupled with your rich combat experience, those spiritualists might not be able to do anything to you. That means we can kill people? Please don't." Rikdos was shocked. Large numbers of spiritualists have come to Istanbul. The most outstanding spiritualists in the world are all here. Even the top spiritualists are here. If you kill any spiritualist now, there might be a storm of revenge. Rikdos was ambitious, but that didn't mean he was stupid. He was also arrogant enough to think that he could defeat all the heroes. Not to mention the top existences. Any one of them could press him to the ground and rub him. Even among the people qualified to participate in the Battle of Holy Glory, there were a few who could defeat him. The consequences of killing indiscriminately in Istanbul were very serious. Ordinary people didn't need to be mentioned. If a spiritualist killed an ordinary person, or even if there was direct evidence that it was done by a spiritualist, there would be extremely serious consequences. As for spiritualists, even the most ordinary spiritualist might have a god standing behind them. He couldn't afford to offend anyone. Ruik Des suppressed his strong uneasiness. He had seen the bloodthirsty side of Chen Zhao and Bifla. At that time, he also catered to their interests and tricked them into coming here. However, the two of them performed well in the modification experiment. It was still worth it for Ruik Saunders. But when Chen Zhao said those words, Ruik felt his eyelids twitch. "There will be a chance in the future, but not this time. What I want you to do is to bring the bodies here, not to kill. Do you understand?" Ruik Des regained his coldness. "You can't kill people." "Boring," Chen Zhao complained. Ruik Des narrowed his eyes. "Are you going to refuse my order?" Okay, calm down." Chen Zhao chuckled and waved his hand. "I'll listen to your orders. That's for the best." Let's move quickly. Then Chen Zhao, Bifla, and Mato Shinji were sent out of the underground base. Very soon, Mato Shinji realized that Chen Zhao and Bifla weren't going to the mission location. The two of them found a restaurant on the side of the road and ordered a lot of food. Aren't we going to the mission now? What's the rush? Chen Zhao rolled his eyes. Look at the time. It's daytime. Are you going to charge into someone's house and steal the bodies? It's not a hospital, it's someone's house. Fine. Mato Shinji was very unhappy with Chen Zhao and Bifla's negative attitude. But thinking about it, it did seem to make sense. Going to someone's house to steal a body in the daytime. It really wasn't a good idea. After thinking for a while, Mato Shinji said, "Then follow me somewhere." "Where?" "Don't worry about it. Just follow me." "Ms. Mato, please be clear. We're not your subordinates." Mato Shinji stared coldly at Chen Zhao and Bifla. "Are you sure you want to reject my request? Ms. Mato, you might not be able to defeat us. Although you've gone through 4 modification experiments, your foundation is much weaker than ours. Plus, there are 2 of us and you're only 1. Do you think Mr. Sanders didn't give me any trump cards? Do you think he doesn't know your personalities?" Fine, I'll listen to you, Ms. Mato." Chen Zhao's change in attitude was out of Mato Shinji's expectations. She stared at Chen Zhao, who was smiling playfully. She could clearly feel that Chen Zhao wasn't afraid of her. Bifla was the same. Perhaps they didn't care about her trump cards at all. Subconsciously, they looked down on her. Chen Zhao seemed to be compromising, but in reality, he just didn't want to fall out with her so soon. The 3 arrived outside a private house. Chen Zhao, Bifla, and Mato Shinji stood opposite the community road. They stared at the house from afar. What kind of people live in there? Are they your enemies? Do you need me to go in and kill everyone inside? Mato Shinji glared at Chen Zhao. Shut up. Just then a car stopped in front of the house. A man and a few children of different ages alighted from the car. There were 4 children in total. One was 11 or 12 years old. One was 8 or 9. One was 4 or 5. And the last one was in the man's arms. It was less than 2 years old. Mato Shinji couldn't help but get excited. She stared closely at the child beside the man. At that moment, another woman got out of the car. She was pregnant. Mato Shinji held onto the tree trunk, her palms tearing through the bark. "Is that man the liar you mentioned?" Chen Zhao asked curiously. "Didn't you say he died?" "No, he's my ex-husband." "Oh, so those children are your children." "It's not a wise choice to bring 2 killers to visit someone you care about," Bifla said indifferently. Mato Shinji was stunned. She really hadn't thought about this. She brought Chen Zhao and Bifla here because she had a mission to monitor them. She couldn't let Chen Zhao and Bifla out of her sight. But she also wanted to see her own children. That was why she'd brought them along. She didn't expect that Bifla's words would instantly make her realize something. Chen Zhao and Bifla were dangerous. Chapter 2200. Mato Shinji glanced at Chen Zhao and Bifla. A hidden murderous intent flashed across her eyes. However, Mato Shinji's disguise was too crude. Who were Chen Zhao and Bifla? Mato Shinji's trick seemed like a joke before the 2 of them. She glanced at her child and ex-husband from afar. Mato Shinji left with Chen Zhao and Bifla. It was getting late. The 3 went to the designated mission location. According to the information they'd received from Ruik Des, this should be a private villa. From the outside, it indeed looked like a private villa. But when the 3 looked down from a high slope thousands of meters away, they could see that it was a heavily guarded fortress. There were at least 4 guards visible to the naked eye. There were also people going in and out of the villa. Also, they couldn't see their target from this high slope. Those people had probably placed the corpses inside the building. Chen Zhao glanced at Bifla. At this distance, even Chen Zhao couldn't sense the situation inside the villa. But Bifla's senses could definitely tell. Bifla was expressionless though. Chen Zhao couldn't see anything from his face. Inside the villa, an old man in a gray robe sat on the sofa. He held a metal walking stick with his hands, and his eyes were slightly closed. Just then a young spiritualist came in from outside. "Mr. Rodman, I sense that someone's spying on this place." The old man called Rodman didn't open his eyes. He only replied, "Got it. You can leave." The young spiritualist left the hall respectfully. Hey Hami. Another copper called the young spiritualist. Come here. What for? Hami came to a corner. That old man Rodman still hasn't reacted? You're new. Of course you don't know. Know what? Could it be that the old man is blind? Mr. Rodman cultivates blind. People who cultivate this can't open their eyes. What happens if they open their eyes? Everyone around will lose their vision, Hami said. What kind of spell is this? Or is it some kind of ability? This is a special characteristic of the blind magic. Although Mr. Rodman did not open his eyes, his mind's eye has always been observing his surroundings. His senses are sharper than anyone else's, so even without his eyes, he knows what is going on. Although the effect is quite good, it's only effective against ordinary people. Even if spiritualists lose their vision, they still have other senses and perception abilities. Naive. Losing your sight is just your first reaction. Although Mr. Rodman's strength isn't the best, he is known as the undefeatable blind. Do you know why? Why? Because no one can defeat him. Isn't that an exaggeration? There are so many spiritualists in the world, and there are even a few top-notch existences. How is it possible that no one can defeat him? It's because he can only open his eyes once. Once he'll be invincible. As long as one falls into darkness, he can banish everyone who falls into darkness to the world of darkness. No one can be exempted, not even the strongest spiritualists. Hami said, this is the secret of his invincibility, the only chance in his life to be invincible. So powerful? Of course. So it's safest for Mr. Rodman to guard the corpses of these spiritualists. No one dares to offend him. There's no way to avoid falling into darkness? Not any known magic, be it Eastern or Western, Roland said. Since that old man is so powerful, why does he need us? How boring. Other than Rodman, the other guards here were the younger generation of various forces. This was because this was where the corpses of those who died in the Battle of Holy Glory were stored, and because the grudges between the various forces were complicated. Moreover, the corpses of spiritualists were also very valuable. If only someone from one force was guarding the corpses of the spiritualists, no one knew what kind of trouble would occur. In the past, a spiritualist guarding the corpses secretly refined the corpses. In the end, it led to a war between the forces. Therefore, in the Battle of Holy Glory, as long as the corpses of those who died in the battle were under unified management, the various forces would also send people to temporarily guard the corpses. Basically, if someone died in a force's team, that force would have to send someone to temporarily guard the corpses. Of course, Rodman was the person in charge here. Therefore, most of the time this place was peaceful. Inside and outside, no one dared to peep here. After all, the risk of facing Rodman was far greater than obtaining the corpses of a few spiritualists. The benefits and risks were not proportional, so of course the situation was peaceful. Of course, occasionally, some reckless thieves would come here to take advantage of them. Most of the time, Rodman didn't need to do anything. The entry-level disciples or members of the various forces were enough to send those thieves away. You have super perception. Do you know who is watching over us this time? I don't know. Even Mr. Rodman, who is in charge here, doesn't know and actually dared to peep here. It's most likely a group of brainless idiots. Idiots are good too. Those big shots are participating in the Battle of Holy Glory, and we small people are guarding the corpses here. Finally, we have a chance to exercise our muscles. We can't beat those great experts, so we can use this group of idiots to practice our skills. The guards in the villa soon knew that a group of people had their eyes on this place. Most of the guards were already extremely bored. They heard that they could fight with others, and that they could do it openly. They were all very excited. The villa looked peaceful under the night sky, but the guards inside were all overflowing with fighting spirit. Ms. Mato, what's your plan? One of you is in charge of attracting the guards' attention, Mato Shinji said. One of you go in and find and steal the corpses. I'll be here to support you. You really know how to choose missions, Shinjiao said mockingly. Isn't the mission too difficult for you? It's getting late. Hurry, Bifla urged. Okay, Ms. Mato. There's still some distance from here to the villa, but don't let your guard down. This isn't a safe zone. Those guys have all kinds of strange abilities. Who knows what special ones they might have? You don't have to be so nosy. Just mind your own mission. Mobile version of the fastest.d website. Chapter 2201. Chen Zhao glanced at Bifla. Are you going to restrain him or should I? Chen Zhao asked. Rock, paper, scissors, Bifla said emotionlessly. Chen Zhao and Bifla attacked at the same time. The winner was decided immediately. Chen Zhao lost. He could only accept the result helplessly. With that, Chen Zhao put on his black mask. He was also wearing a black shirt and pants. One could tell at a glance that he wasn't a good person. In the distance, Mato Shinji stared expressionlessly at Chen Zhao and Bifla outside the house. When she saw Chen Zhao's attire, she was still a bit dazed. Chen Zhao's attire was too eye-catching. Usually, a thief who broke into a house at night would wear this attire. Chen Zhao jumped onto the wall. Under the cover of the night, he secretly observed the situation inside the house. But before he could jump into the yard, the spiritualists appeared to welcome him. A bolt of lightning shot toward Chen Zhao's position. But Chen Zhao had already dodged it. He flipped lightly and performed a difficult maneuver in the air, landing steadily. Just then, the spiritualists who'd been lying in ambush appeared one by one. A dozen or so spiritualists stood in a circle, surrounding Chen Zhao. You better surrender. Otherwise you'll be seriously injured. Hami held a weapon that looked like a magic staff. The bolt of lightning just now had come from this magic tool. The other spiritualists also held the same magic tool, but the tip of this magic tool shone with different elements. It was a simple yet intricate magic tool. Chen Zhao probed a bit and roughly understood the mechanism of the magic tool. No matter what element the spiritualist had, as long as they poured magic power into the tool, they could create magic attacks of the tool's own element. In the distance, Mato Shinji, who was using a telescope with night vision, frowned. She wasn't worried about Chen Zhao's life. She was worried about what would happen if Chen Zhao was caught. Would it implicate Ruick deaths? At this moment the situation changed again. With incredible speed, Chen Zhao flipped backward and flew into the bushes behind him. The spiritualists were stunned at first. Then they used the magic tools in their hands to shoot randomly into the grass. But when they flipped over the grass, they realized that Chen Zhao had already escaped. Ah! Just then, a scream came from a corner not far away. The spiritualists hurriedly ran to the corner. He found a copper coin lying on the ground. My neck, help me! Help me! Chen Zhao escaped from the bushes and ran into the spiritualist blocking his way. Although he was a little heavy-handed, he didn't kill. However, the feeling of having his neck broken by Chen Zhao was definitely something he had never felt before. In fact, the neck was second only to the crotch in terms of pain receptors. This was also why the strange phenomenon of sleeping was reflected on his neck. Everyone could only see his back. With a flip, Chen Zhao charged into the villa through the window. Just as Chen Zhao was about to run, he saw a balding old man sitting in the hall. Even though the old man was sitting on the sofa, he was still leaning on his cane. Chen Zhao walked to the front and saw an old man with his eyes closed. The old man looked like he was asleep, but Chen Zhao knew that the old man wasn't asleep. Also, with his aura, he was probably a boss-level character. Hi, sorry to disturb you. Chen Zhao greeted the old man generously. Rodman tilted his head slightly, and the walking stick in his hand hit the ground heavily. Clang! Instantly, Chen Zhao felt a shock wave spread from the point of contact between the cane and the ground. Then, all the glass windows in the entire villa were shattered. The young spiritualists who'd chased Chen Zhao had just entered the villa from the various entrances. He was sent flying by the shockwave that came head-on. Chen Zhao only covered his face with his arm. His night suit was slightly damaged. As for himself, he was completely unharmed. What a fierce old man. Chen Zhao couldn't help but comment. Rodman's eyes were still closed, but when he heard Chen Zhao's voice, he couldn't help but frown. Not dead. From his voice, he didn't seem to be injured. Rodman gripped the end of his walking stick tightly. Instantly, Chen Zhao felt like the entire world had turned upside down. No, it wasn't a feeling. Chen Zhao realized that his feet had left the ground, and he was falling toward the roof. Gravity magic. It wasn't Chen Zhao's first time encountering gravity magic. However, This spell was not a gravity spell. Chen Zhao quickly realized that the feeling of weightlessness wasn't because of gravity. Instead, it was because of his senses. The old man in front of him had his eyes closed, and his magic directly affected his senses. Moreover, this effect wasn't immune to magic resistance. His non-elemental body didn't react at all. After Chen Zhao's feet left the ground slightly, he sank back down and stood on the ground again. It wasn't that Chen Zhao had overcome this sensory magic. Instead, Chen Zhao directly accepted this posture of his head down and feet up. With Chen Zhao's strength, flying upside down wasn't a problem. After overcoming the psychological barrier, this posture wasn't a problem anymore. The biggest effect of this magic was to deceive the senses. Rodman frowned again. The intruder before him could block his magic attack twice. He didn't seem like a normal person. Chen Zhao felt Rodman's magic start to circulate wildly. It seemed that the old man was going to fight him for real. Old man, don't fight me to the death. There's someone fiercer behind. I'm responsible for holding him back, and he's responsible for stealing the corpses. How about we stop fighting here? You can save some energy and magic to deal with the one behind. How about that? Just then, Chen Zhao felt that Rodman's magic wave was even fiercer than before. It was like a flood from a broken dam, ready to pour down at any time. Rodman's eyelids kept moving, as if he was going to open his eyes. Rodman was also hesitating. The person before him was definitely not an ordinary spiritualist. He definitely couldn't beat him with his eyes closed. Even with the group of youngsters outside, he had no chance of winning. His only chance was to open his eyes. He could directly activate blind, which he could only use once in his life. Of course, if he activated blind, he would definitely win. But he would also lose his greatest trump card. This was also why Rodman was hesitating. Rodman was not someone who had no desires or desires. If the opponent was someone extremely powerful, or if it was a duel between two people, Rodman would activate blind without hesitation. But the problem was that the opponent wasn't. Chapter 2202. No matter what anyone did, there was always a value or not. In Rodman's eyes, Chen Zhao was the unworthy type. Activating the once-in-a-lifetime blind eye on Chen Zhao wasn't worth it at all. Gradually, Chen Zhao felt Rodman's magical waves calm down. Huh? Did he give up? Chen Zhao smiled and turned to leave. He didn't know why Rodman would give up the thought of risking his life. But it was good for him. After all, he didn't want to fight Rodman. After leaving the mansion, Chen Zhao started sneaking around again. No one was chasing him anymore. Chen Zhao jumped onto the wall and found Bifla. It's your turn. There's a fierce old man inside. Be careful. I know him, Bifla said indifferently. I'm just surprised that he didn't attack you. Is that old man really strong? Chen Zhao asked. I can feel his magical waves. He's an expert, but he shouldn't be at your level. His magical level can't even be in the top 100 in the entire spiritual world. But in terms of danger, even 10 celestial master Zhangs might not be his match. Chen Zhao's eyes widened. No way. What level is Zhang? Did you get it wrong? That old man can't beat Zhang even 10 times. You're saying that even 10 Zhangs can't beat him? That old man doesn't have any other abilities. His magic power is above average, and his mastery of magic is above average. However, he has mastered one type of magic to its essence. He only uses it once in his life, and this magic is enough to kill all spiritualists. Chen Zhao sucked in a breath of cold air. Even though Befora had exaggerated it so much, Chen Zhao still believed him. Including you? That move is terrifying, but it's not invincible. Both Celestial Master Zhang and I have a way to counter it. In the spiritual world, strength is still the most important. What way? Bifla glanced at Chen Zhao. His figure gradually disappeared before Chen Zhao. Hoofed. Putting on airs again. A few minutes later, Chen Zhao saw Bifla drag 2 corpses out. The 2 corpses were in a body bag. Chen Zhao wasn't interested in opening the bag. Alright, let's go. Chen Zhao took 2 steps back, not planning to take over at all. However, Madhua Shinji did not wait at the place they had agreed to. What should we do now? That motto disappeared. Chen Zhao looked around. Everything was dark. There was no sign of motto Xing at all. Bifla looked at the time. Wait for her for 5 minutes. If she doesn't come, we'll go back to the underground base ourselves. She either escaped or got caught. There's no need to wait for her. Chen Zhao didn't care about Madhwa Xng's life or death. Bifla knew this as well, but he still waited for 5 minutes. 5 minutes later, Madhwa Xingji still did not appear. We can go now. Bifla dragged the 2 corpses and disappeared into the night without looking back. After returning to the underground base, Ruik Des looked at Chen Zhao and Bifla. Where's Madhwa? Missing, Chen Zhao said. Disappeared? Luke Des was doubtful about this. After all, Chen Zhao and Bifla were assassins. He even suspected that Chen Zhao and Bifla had killed Madhwa Xingji. Why would she disappear? Chen Zhao told him the plan the 3 had come up with earlier. Luke Des furrowed his brows. He suspected that Chen Zhao was lying, but it wasn't likely. There was also another possibility. Madhwa Xingji had been caught. Didn't you find any clues? As assassins, you should be good at this, right? We're assassins, not hunters. Take me to where Madhwa disappeared, Luke Des said. Now, Chen Zhao wasn't very willing. We just finished a high-risk mission, Bifla said indifferently. Also, this is the first time in my career that I didn't receive any advance payment. So before we get the benefits, we won't listen to any of your orders. What he means is what I mean, Chen Zhao added. In Luke Des's eyes, Chen Zhao and Bifla were 2 big problems. He secretly decided that after he finished using them, he would let them die. Help me find Madhwa Xingji. After it's done, I'll arrange a feast of slaughter for you. As long as you're strong enough, you can kill those preys as you please. Even though Chen Zhao and Bifla could tell what Luke Des was thinking, they still pretended to be interested. You said it, Bifla said coldly. If you can't satisfy my desire to kill, I'll start a massacre here. That's what you said. If you can't satisfy my desire to kill, I'll start a massacre here, said Bifla coldly. Then lead the way. Luke Des's tone was much colder. Then lead the way. Luke Des's tone was much colder. Chen Zhao and Bifla brought Luke Des back to the old place. At the time, the 3 of us were lying in ambush on this small hill. After sunset, we followed the plan and entered the villa. Miss Madhwa was in charge of supporting us and helping us monitor the movements in the villa. But when we came back with the corpse, we found that she was already gone. Loic Des's face darkened. As he listened to Chen Zhao's explanation, he looked around. There was a weak magic reaction in this area. It should have been about 3 hours since the incident happened. But he could still feel the magic waves here. This meant that a very powerful spiritualist had been here. This also eliminated the possibility of Chen Zhao and Bifla's betrayal. At least in Luke Des's eyes, Chen Zhao and Bifla were 2 murderous killers, not spiritualists. There weren't many marks at the scene, and there weren't any serious signs of a fight. This only meant that Madhwa Xingji had been controlled in an instant. Otherwise, she could at least use the berserk potion that he'd given her. She didn't even have the chance to use the berserk potion. This meant that this person was far more powerful than her. There's a weird smell here. Bifla suddenly rubbed his nose, acting uncomfortable. Weird smell. Luke Des turned his head to look at Bifla. What kind of weird smell? It's similar to your lab, Bifla said. What's this? Chen Zhao picked up a scale at an appropriate time. Luke Des immediately snatched the scale from Chen Zhao's hands. This is. Ruik instantly recognized the origin of the scale. Chapter 2203. In the spiritual world, there were many supernatural races with scales. The most prominent was of course the dragon race. But dragons were a minority. They couldn't compare to the total number of humans. Even the human spiritualists in the spirit world only made up a small portion of them. But the scale in Ruik's hand wasn't a dragon. If this was a dragon's scale, Ruik Des would definitely turn around and leave. It was a snake scale. More accurately, it was a scale left behind by the swamp race. The swamp race was actually a snake demon. In the east, they were snake demons. But in the east, they couldn't form a race. In the west, they gathered themselves and formed a race. They called themselves the swamp race. They even formed a certain scale. The swamp race was a powerful force in the spiritual world. But they weren't the strongest. There were tens of thousands of swamp people. But they didn't have any top experts. Moreover, the descendants of the swamp race would mostly show signs of atavism. The so-called atavism was a litter of newborns. Most of them were ordinary snakes. Only a small number would inherit the name of the swamp race. Plus, there were human activities and the resources they possessed. So the swamp race's limit of 10,000 people was basically the limit. Of course, they could develop. This was mostly because their development path and ideals were in line with the values of modern society. Although their name was a bit scary. Actually, the other forces in the spiritual world had deep interactions with the swamp race. Ruik held the scale and thought for a long time. The swamp race was very difficult to deal with. They didn't have the terrifying, suffocating feeling of the dragons. But he still couldn't fight against them. Of course, it wasn't the entire swamp race in Istanbul. So Ruik was still hesitant about whether to risk starting a war with the swamp race. It could be seen from Ruik's hesitation. The difference between the swamp race and the dragons. In the end, Ruik decided to save Motto Xing. Do you want to start a massacre? Ruik Des turned to look at Chen Zhao and Bifla. You know the answer, Bifla replied indifferently. But you're not strong enough. Do you want to become stronger? Chen Zhao and Bifla both looked up at Ruik Des. Both of them wanted to see what Ruik Dales had up his sleeve. You all possess talents that mortals cannot hope to attain. For ordinary people, the modification experiments are incomparably dangerous. But for you, it is not even comparable to the tempering you have experienced in the past. Just tell me, what do we need to do? My previous plan was to create a Superman. But in my plan, I neglected the endurance of most people. In the end, I adjusted the plan. This modification experiment is actually a simplified version of the old plan. I originally thought that the plan would never start until I met you guys. Of course I'm fine with it, Chen Zhao said honestly. As long as I can become stronger, I'm willing to accept your plan. Ruik Des looked at Bifla. What about you? He accepts it, and so do I. After returning to the underground base, Ruik Des brought the two of them to an area. Chen Zhao and Bifla had never been to this area before. In this area, there were some seemingly old instruments. They looked like products from the 50s or 60s of the last century. Perhaps because they had not been used for a long time. The instruments were covered in dust, and even a bit damaged. Help me turn on the power. Also help me open the valve over there. After turning on the power and valve, some indicator lights of the instruments lit up. At the same time, some thick liquid flowed through the pipes into two containers. Is this liquid the same as the magic potion we used before? Chen Zhao asked. In essence, it's the same, but the purity is higher. The one you used before was diluted. The first magic potion in the experiment was diluted to less than 5%. In every subsequent experiment, the purity would increase by 5%. The magic potion in front of you is 100% pure. Will these potions go bad? It looks like they have been stored for decades. The raw materials of these potions have been deposited for hundreds, or even thousands of years, so they won't go bad. Even if they are stored for 10 times longer, their effects will not change. Chen Zhao and Bifla could both feel that Ruik Des definitely did not want them to become stronger. It was not to satisfy their desires. Ruik Des thought that he had everything under control. He thought that Chen Zhao and Bifla were doing this for the desire to kill. In reality, it was just to satisfy their evil interests. Take off your clothes and enter the containers, Ruik Des said. Leave the rest to me. You better be careful. Bifla's voice rang in Chen Zhao's ears. These potions are much stronger than the ones before. If they accidentally invade your body, your brain will be wiped out. I'll tell you the same thing, Chen Zhao said looking at Bifla. What are you talking about? Hurry up and go in. Don't waste time. Chen Zhao looked back at Ruik Des. Fine. When Chen Zhao stepped into the container, he immediately felt the potions corrode his skin like sharp blades. Unfortunately, the effects were indeed strong to normal people, but they could not affect Chen Zhao. Bifla followed closely behind and stepped into the container. Ruik Des turned on the device. Chen Zhao could feel a high-voltage electricity being injected into the potions. The electricity also made the potions stronger. Unfortunately, Chen Zhao's upper limit was too high. Even the enhanced potion could not work on Chen Zhao. Ruik Des frowned and stared at Chen Zhao and Bifla, who were soaking in the containers. The two's reactions were too calm. In the past, the experimental bodies in these two containers would struggle wildly in every generation. But Chen Zhao and Bifla acted as if nothing had happened. They were calmly soaking in the potions. In fact, Ruik Des had never thought of success when he suggested the superhuman transformation. What he needed was combat power, a combat power that he could control. Not a successful experimental body. But Chen Zhao and Bifla did not react during the experiment. Their lack of reaction made him wonder if the two of them could really succeed. Chen Zhao, who had been in the container, suddenly opened his eyes. Chapter 2204. Out of the corner of his eye, Rooker glanced at the concentration monitor. The concentration of the potion was dropping rapidly. In the container, Chen Zhao could feel that something in his body was interacting with the potion's effects. Potion X. Chen Zhao had taken a lot of it before. At first it was indeed effective, but more of the potion settled in his body. Chen Zhao thought that it was an extra part. But now, Potion X was interacting with the potion in the container. In just a few minutes, Chen Zhao had completely absorbed the concentration of the potion in the container. The potion was like drops of water, nourishing Chen Zhao's body. The nourishment was very subtle, but it was really happening. If it was a normal person, each drop could make them superhuman. It was mainly because Chen Zhao's upper limit was too high. The neutralization of the two potions also increased Chen Zhao's upper limit. When the concentration of the potion was completely diluted, the container was shattered. Chen Zhao twisted his neck and looked at Rooker. Ruik Des was still in a state of shock. You succeeded? You absorbed the potion? The man before him didn't go crazy? This was simply too inconceivable. Chen Zhao didn't answer Rooker's question. Instead, he turned to look at the container beside him, and at Bifla. Just then Bifla opened his eyes too. Bifla also shattered the container. Rooker saw Bifla calmly walk out of the container. He was shocked again. Success on the first try was surprising but understandable. But succeeding twice at the same time was unbelievable. Both of them had succeeded. This meant that his plan to control them had failed. After all, he could only control Chen Zhao and Bifla if they lost control. Not bad. Looks like my body has improved a lot. Bifla clenched his fists. Chen Zhao glanced at Bifla. It seemed that Bifla had improved too. He also felt that Bifla had improved more than Chen Zhao. Don't you feel anything strange? Rooker looked at Chen Zhao and Bifla with sparkling eyes. No, Bifla said calmly. It's very comfortable. Me too. All right. Ruik Dale still held on to the last glimmer of hope. He hoped that Chen Zhao and Bifla's stability was only temporary. But Chen Zhao and Bifla didn't react at all. But at this moment, even though his heart was filled with disappointment, Ruik Des could not show it either. After all, he still needed to rely on the two of them to rescue Madhua Shinji. Now that you've gotten what you want, it's time for you to contribute. Do you have any questions? Of course, it's my pleasure. Killing, this is what I pursue. Bifla's cold expression was as if he was stating a fact. We will depart in an hour. I will gather everyone and move together. Since Ruik Des had made up his mind to start a war with the swamp tribe. In that case, this underground base would have to be abandoned. These subordinates who had undergone the experiments would also be completely abandoned. Therefore, there was no need to hide it anymore. He might as well throw himself into this battle. If possible, he naturally hoped to bring as many of his subordinates as possible. However, most of his subordinates were criminals. Basically, they were the type that would die in the light. It would be fine if it was just one or two of them. If a large group of people appeared in public view at the same time. Basically, it would directly invite the government's encirclement and suppression. This was also the reason why he kept his subordinates in the underground base for so long. Among these subordinates, many were like Chen Zhao and Bifla. They were even crueler and more bloodthirsty. An hour later, everyone was assembled. Many people had excited expressions on their faces. They seemed to really believe that this would be a feast of slaughter. They did not know who their opponent was this time. They had no idea what was waiting for them. Ruik Des prepared 2 large trucks and let everyone squeeze into the 2 back compartments. However, Chen Zhao and Bifla were exceptions. Because they told Ruik Desai, if they were squeezed together with these people, they would kill everyone. Therefore, the two of them obtained the right to sit in the front passenger seat. Bifla, what do you plan to do? Are you really going to fight for Ruik Des? It's just a fight between two forces. Why should we interfere? Besides, the Swamp Tribe is also a strong competitor for our team. Isn't it better to have Ruik Descartes charge for us? Alright, I'll listen to you. In fact, that was his plan. Not long after, the two trucks sank into the soft mud. They could no longer rely on the vehicles to move forward. Everyone could only get out and move forward. It was a wet and filthy swamp. The feeling of stepping on the soft soil was very good. Even Chen Zhao and Bifla did not like this environment. There were also large patches of grass in the swamp. The grass was even taller than people. Ah! Suddenly, someone let out a blood-curdling scream. Ruik Desai turned around and saw that his subordinate had been bitten by a poisonous snake in the grass. Before he could save him, the poison had already taken effect. Everyone apply the snake repellent. Ruik Desai had prepared this beforehand. Even Chen Zhao and Bifla had received the snake repellent. As expected, after applying the drug, the poisonous snakes hiding in the dark all fled the area. Even though a large portion of these venomous snakes were controlled. However, this control could not surpass the snake's instinct. The snake repellent would make the user emit an extremely pungent smell. Snakes could not even get close to the user. But in this swamp, they did not only have to face the hidden poisonous snakes. They also had to face the swamp itself. At this moment, someone began to cry for help. I'm stuck in the mud. Help me pull me out. I need help too. Me too. Suddenly, the moonlight in the sky was covered by dark clouds. Chen Zhao and Bifla looked up. They realized that it was not the dark clouds that covered the moonlight, but magic power. The dark clouds in the sky had been created by magic. A few minutes later it started raining. The snake repellent on everyone was quickly washed away. The swamp race looks pretty strong, Chen Zhao said in a low voice. Of course. None of the teams or individuals who can participate in the Holy Glory battle are simple. That's nothing. The swamp race is proficient in many types of magic. Poison, water, and curse are the most prominent. Looks like Ruik Desai has underestimated the enemy when he brought people to cause trouble. Shouldn't we balance out the strength of both sides? Chapter 2205. Suddenly, Chen Zhao felt many presences appear around the swamp. They were all spiritualists, and there were more than 10 of them. What's going on? Why are there so many people? Chen Zhao turned to look at Bifla in surprise. Looks like it's a trap, Bifla said. A trap? Against us? Or Ruik Des? Of course it's a trap against him. Do you think these people can threaten us? While Chen Zhao and Bifla were talking, Ruik Des was still having a headache over his subordinates. It was raining heavily, and the ground was even more muddy. Many venomous snakes were also hiding in the grass, mud and puddles. At any time, they would bring deadly venom attacks to those who approached them. He didn't realize that he was leading his subordinates into a trap step by step. Ruik Des looked back at Chen Zhao and Bifla. Chen Zhao and Bifla were also drenched in the rain, but they looked very calm. They weren't impulsive or bloodthirsty at all. Suddenly, there was another scream from behind. A huge snake pounced out of the darkness. It bit a person, and then retreated into the grass. It's here! Ruik Des exclaimed inwardly. This exaggerated snake wasn't an ordinary species. They were actually descendants of the swamp race, but they'd all reverted to their ancestors. They couldn't have both human and snake forms like the swamp race. They could only maintain their snake form, but they also had talents that the swamp race didn't have. They were born with venomous fangs and huge bodies. They were also born smarter than ordinary snakes. Usually the swamp race lived in families. There were 2 adult swamp race couples, 1 or 2 young swamp race members, and the couple's reverted children. Moreover, the number of reverted children far exceeded the number of young children. Sometimes, there might not even be a child in a nest of snake eggs. So when these descendants appeared, it meant that the swamp race had appeared. More and more descendants of atavism appeared in the surroundings. Some of the descendants no longer hid themselves, and openly appeared in front of Ruik Dales and the others. Among them, there was a particularly large snake that raised its neck high like a snake king. Just the head of the snake standing in front of everyone was already 7 to 8 meters long, and this was not even a third of its length. On top of the snake's head stood a figure. It was a woman tall and slender wearing tight clothes. His white hair reached his waist and was extremely eye-catching. Ruik Des, you really came. Let's settle our scores today. Ruik Des looked up at the person standing on top of the snake's head. Medusa, are you going to settle old scores with me? Ruik looked coldly at the white-haired woman. All the swamp tribe called themselves the descendants of Medusa. Therefore, all of the swamp tribe had the surname Medusa. Shouldn't I? You experimented on my child and caused his tragic death. Don't I have the right to settle the score with you? Ruik sneered at Medusa. You were the one who asked me to experiment on your swamp tribe. Have you forgotten? I didn't agree to let you use my child as an experiment. Medusa's tone was full of resentment. You also didn't say that I couldn't experiment on your child. It's useless to say more. Don't think of leaving here today. That's good. I happen to lack materials for the swamp tribe. You can add new experimental materials to my lab. Ruik Des shouted. Do it. With that, Ruik Des quickly threw out a metal ball. The metal ball exploded before it hit the ground. However, the explosion of the metal ball wasn't very powerful. It couldn't even be killed by ordinary people. Not to mention there were huge groups of monsters here. Medusa, however, sensed danger. She immediately controlled the snake under her feet to dodge. Just as she had expected, the moment the metal ball exploded, countless golden needles shot out. These golden needles pierced the skin of the surrounding snakes, immediately numbing the places they pierced. Medusa immediately remembered that Ruik Des was a very powerful alchemist. The surrounding atavistic progeny collapsed to the ground and became meat on the chopping board. Only the snake under her feet was unharmed. This was mainly due to its almost indestructible skin. The snake under Medusa's feet was her descendant. It had also inherited a portion of Medusa's power. It could petrify its enemies, and also its own snake skin. It was one of the very few descendants that could release magic. The snake's huge tail swept across with all its might. More than 10 people were swept away. Ruik Des had dodged in time, so he wasn't swept away. Otherwise, even if it was him, he would have been heavily injured. Ruik Des was very powerful, but he wasn't good at close combat. However, he hadn't come alone this time. Kill all living creatures here, Ruik Des ordered. At the same time, he glanced at his subordinates. However, after looking around for a while, he couldn't find Chen Zhao and Bifla. Damn, where did those 2 asterisk holes go? By now, Medusa's other descendants were already in full contact with Ruik Des's subordinates. Along the way, Ruik Des had lost many people. However, he had seized the opportunity just now, and also made Medusa lose many descendants. For now, it was hard to tell who had the upper hand. Looks like the situation isn't in Ruik Des's favor, Chen Zhao said. You've neglected Ruik Des's own power. He doesn't have the advantage in numbers, but he has extraordinary power. He's not easy to deal with. More than 10 snakes wreaked havoc on the battlefield. Other than Chen Zhao and Bifla who were watching, the others had already joined the battle. After the modification experiments, Ruik Des's subordinates could be considered half-superhumans. Their speed and power had reached heights that humans could never reach. Both sides were losing more and more people. But for Medusa, the casualties of these atavistic children were acceptable. Atavistic children were considered pets in the swamp tribe's families, even if they were Medusa's children. But to the swamp race, these descendants weren't even recognized as members of Iron Gate. Ruik Des didn't care about casualties either. Most of his subordinates were going to be abandoned anyway. So, while they were still useful, Ruik Des didn't mind wasting more subordinates. Chapter 2206. Ruik Des's men and Medusa's heirs were in a chaotic battle. However, it was obvious that Ruik's subordinates were weaker than Medusa's offspring. The snakes were shockingly powerful. They could tear everything apart. On the other hand, Ruik Des had a slight advantage against Medusa. He didn't even need to use other spells. Just the potions were enough to keep Medusa and her offspring at bay. While dealing with Medusa, Ruik Des observed the situation around him. His subordinates kept losing, and if this continued, he would soon become a loner. Chen Zhao and Bifla, whom he had high hopes for, were nowhere to be found. He didn't know that Chen Zhao and Bifla were watching the show from a nearby tree branch. However, Ruik Des sensed that someone else was approaching. Ruik Des's expression changed drastically. It was a trap. Medusa wasn't the only one waiting for him. Someone else was also plotting against him. Plan B. Ruik Des shouted. His remaining subordinates immediately took out a green potion. He'd given this potion to Mato Shinji before. And for this operation, Ruik Des had prepared a copy for everyone. It was prepared for emergencies, and could be used as a trump card at a critical moment. After using the potion, the people immediately went berserk. Their strength increased greatly. At first, they were suppressed by the snakes. In the blink of an eye, they had the strength to fight against the snakes. In fact, their strength had even surpassed their opponents. At the same time, Ruik Des's body emitted a black aura of death. He released it in the direction of the uninvited guests. Just then, a strong wind howled in the opposite direction, blowing the aura of death away. Dozens of spiritualists appeared from all directions and surrounded Ruik Des. Ruik Des only recognized a few of them. Most of them were unrelated to him. He hadn't even met them before. A bespectacled man in a suit walked out of the crowd. This spiritualist looked more like an elite in the workplace, and not a spiritualist who pretended to be mysterious. Ruik, how have you been? The bespectacled man put his hands in his pockets and smiled at Ruik Des. When you see me, you should know what I want. Give it to me, and I'll leave. How would I know what you want? Ruik said indifferently. Haha, why bother putting on an act? I know that the ring of restlessness is in your hands. What ring of restlessness? I've never even heard of it. Ruik Des continued to deny it. The spiritualists around the suited man were a little suspicious. A few of them looked at the bespectacled man suspiciously. It seemed that they weren't completely in cahoots. They were probably lured here by the bespectacled man using treasures. Do you think you can escape by denying it? Don't be naive. If you don't hand it over today, don't even think about going anywhere. I'll go wherever I want to go. Do you really think that you and that motley crew can stop me? Ruik Des had his own pride. Even though he was facing dozens of powerful spiritualists, he didn't flinch either. To be precise, he had no other choice. It was impossible to escape. He might as well fight for his life. These people weren't weak at all, but they were still weaker than Chen Zhao. There were many of them, but they weren't on the same side. Most of them had ulterior motives. They had the same goal, but not everyone could work together. If they could scare them, the spiritualists could easily break through the front line. Chen Zhao and Bifla blended into the crowd. No one noticed their abnormality. What's the Ring of Restlessness? It's an alchemy product of ancient Egypt. It contains the souls and magic of the 10 most powerful spiritualists of that era. Whoever has the Ring of Restlessness can control all the spells and magic of that spiritualist. You mean the 10 most powerful spiritualists of that era? The longer the time, the more magic flourishes. The 10 most powerful spiritualists of that era were at least at Lao Zhang's level, right? Wouldn't 10 spiritualists at Lao Zhang's level be the same as invincible? You're thinking too much. A spiritualist at Master Zhang's level is extremely rare in any era. In ancient times, or even in ancient times, there were only a handful of them. Moreover, I'm talking about ancient Egypt. How many people at Master Zhang's level would there be in an ancient Egyptian country? Besides, do you think someone at Zhang Tianshir's level would allow others to imprison his soul in a magical tool? Even the pharaohs back then didn't have that right. Then forget it. It doesn't seem that rare. The function of the Ring of Restlessness is indeed unattractive to you and me. However, before the Ring of Restlessness was infused with the souls of 10 spiritualists, it was already a divine artifact. According to legend, the 3 treasures passed down by the pharaohs were the Eye of Truth, the Anubis Scepter, and the Ring of Restlessness. Then how did it end up in Ruik Des' hands? How would I know? After ancient Egypt was destroyed, the pharaoh's treasures were split up. It's not surprising that it ended up in someone else's hands. Then what's the use of the Ring of Restlessness? I don't know, Bifla said. At this moment, the situation on the field changed again. The man in glasses pushed Mado Shinji out. Mudwa Shinji's body was tied with magic ropes. And no matter how hard she struggled, she could not break free from the magic ropes. I know what she means to you, the man in glasses said. Give me the ring of restlessness, or she'll die in front of you. Finally, Ruik Dales couldn't stay calm anymore. His face darkened. That's not fun, Bifla said. Mado Shinji isn't his daughter, right? Chen Zhao asked curiously. He paid such a huge price and even used all his power. He even knew that there was danger, but he still took the risk. I don't believe that they're not related. Mado Shinji isn't his daughter. She's his heir. Heir? She's just an heir. Is she that important? This kind of heir is very special. Before Mado Shinji was born, her identity was already determined. You're talking about fate? It's not fate. Ruik Des separated a part of his soul when Madwa Shinji's mother was pregnant with her, and then placed it in Madwa Shinji's mother's body. Finally, Madwa Shinji was born. This is also another kind of longevity. When did you know? Very early on. When I saw Ruik Des and Mado Shinji appear in front of me together, I already saw it. Chen Zhao was a little depressed because he hadn't seen anything. Chapter 2207. Ruik Des's face grew colder and colder. Both sides of Madwa Shinji were powerful spiritualists. They could deal with almost any problem. At least, it was almost impossible for Ruik Des to save Madwa Shinji before she was hurt. Do you want the ring of restlessness? Sure. Ruik Des took out a golden ring and tossed it casually. The golden ring hovered in the center of the field. The eyes of the dozens of spirit controllers shone brightly. More than a dozen spiritualists reacted quickly and rushed forward to snatch it without hesitation. These spiritualists grabbed the golden ring almost at the same time. Mine. Let go. You're the ones who should let go. This is a divine artifact. Lowly people like you aren't qualified to have it. But the next moment, everyone suddenly realized that their palms couldn't break free from the ring of restlessness. A terrifying suction force suddenly appeared on the ring of restlessness. Damn it, what's going on? Oh no, we've been tricked. Then, the ring of restlessness began to move up, and more than a dozen arms were completely bound. The diameter of the ring of restlessness was less than 30 centimeters, and it forcibly bound more than a dozen arms. The pain the owners of these arms endured was unimaginable. Save us. My arm. My arm. This wasn't the worst. At this time, the arms of these spiritualists that were bound by the ring of restlessness began to disintegrate. Their arms seemed to be dissolving by something, gradually disintegrating and disappearing. This made them even more painful, but they couldn't do anything. Not only were their arms disintegrating, but their magic power was also constantly tilting outwards. And the ring of restlessness's goal wasn't just their arms, but their entire bodies. At this time, one of the spiritualists was forcibly pulled into the ring of restlessness. The others were frightened. They realized that this ring of restlessness wasn't used to bind them. Instead, it treated them as food. Someone tried to break his arm directly, but not only was the broken arm instantly swallowed, but even the blood that spurted out was also sucked into the ring of restlessness. At the same time, even the blood in his body was extracted. The spiritualists around who weren't bound also tried to rescue them, but in the end, they made no progress, and even they were in great danger. In just 2 to 3 minutes, the dozen or so spiritualists were all devoured by the ring of restlessness. Medusa and the bespectacled man's pupils constricted. Even though they all wanted the ring of restlessness, they didn't dare to touch it at this time. Ruik Des walked in front of the ring of endlessness and caught it. Is this the divine weapon you want? It's right in front of you. Do you dare to take it? You must have the spell to control the ring of restlessness. Hand it over, or I'll kill her now. The bespectacled man placed his palm on Madwa Shinji's neck. Madwa Shinji was anxious and angry, but compared to the spiritualists present, her strength was really not worth mentioning. Ruik Des's expression was cold as he held the ring of restlessness in his hands and placed it behind his head. The ring of restlessness didn't touch Ruik Dorjes. Instead, it hovered vertically at the back of Ruik Dorjes's head like a *** hole. At the same time, Ruik's aura began to grow stronger. Moreover, this kind of strength was not the end, but a starting point. Everyone at the scene was moved by this. They all felt the raging waves of magic. Even the bespectacled man took a few steps back unconsciously. Terrifying. Too terrifying. Before Ruik Des kept growing stronger, he suddenly sensed Chen Zhao and Bifla's location. Ruik Des looked at where Chen Zhao and Bifla were. The two were in the crowd of spiritualists, slowly approaching Madhua Xinji. The bespectacled man grabbed Madhua Xinji's neck nervously. Hand over the ring of restlessness, and the control spell immediately, or I'll kill her now. But just then, the bespectacled man suddenly felt a chill behind him. The bespectacled man reacted quickly, and jumped more than 10 meters away. Madhua Xinji suddenly saw the two spiritualists who were guarding her fall to the ground without warning. Madhua Xinji turned her head, and saw Chen Zhao and Bifla standing on either side of her. Mr. Des, please continue. Miss Madhua is safe now. I'll make sure that they won't use her as a bargaining chip to threaten you. Smiling, Chen Zhao looked at Ruik Des. Glancing at Chen Zhao and Bifla, Ruik Des took a deep breath at the same time. Who are you? The bespectacled man was furious. Originally, with Madhua Xinji in their hands, they were in an invincible position. No matter how strong Ruik Des was, he would eventually lose. Even with so many spiritualists, they couldn't kill Ruik Des. At least with Madhua Xinji, Ruik Des didn't dare to advance recklessly. But it was different now. Madhua Xinji had been kidnapped by two unknown people. Ruik Des's eyes flashed. He couldn't figure out Chen Zhao and Bifla's goal. Previously, Chen Zhao and Bifla hadn't appeared. Now that they'd appeared voluntarily, Ruik Des couldn't understand. Moreover, Chen Zhao and Bifla were standing on either side of Madhua Xinji. This made Ruik Des feel that Chen Zhao and Bifla were up to no good. In fact, Chen Zhao and Bifla had attacked. It wasn't for a fair fight. It was just because Madhua Xinji was a hostage that made Ruik Des feel troubled. As long as Madhua Xinji was held hostage, Ruik Des couldn't use his full power, no matter how strong he was. So, Chen Zhao and Bifla decided to get rid of Ruik Des's biggest restriction. He didn't need to be restrained anymore. Ruik Des was suspicious of Chen Zhao and Bifla's goal. But he knew that this wasn't the time to settle scores with them. He had to deal with the enemies on the surface first. Plus, Chen Zhao and Bifla were protecting Madhua Xinji, which made him feel trustworthy. Fam, you don't have any trump cards that can threaten me anymore. What should you do now? The bespectacled man named Fam adjusted his glasses. Even if you don't know, the result won't change. You might be able to defeat any one of us, but you are now facing 6 teams, and you are alone. You have no chance of winning. Really? You think you can turn the situation around with enough people? You think you can win for sure? If you're really confident in beating so many people, you wouldn't be wasting time here, Marfa said coldly. Chapter 2208. Ruik Des laughed angrily. Do you all think so? Mr. Des, I look forward to you turning the situation around. Chen and Bifla wanted to take Madhua Xinji away from the center of the battlefield. But the spiritualists clearly didn't intend to let them go so easily. Just then, Bifla pulled out 2 desert eagles out of nowhere. Bang bang bang. The 3 spiritualists who stood in front of them fell to the ground. Don't block our way. The spiritualists couldn't help but look serious. To be able to kill 3 powerful spiritualists in an instant, no matter what method was used, it was enough to show how powerful the person who did it was. Could ordinary guns really kill 3 spiritualists so easily? No one would have such a ridiculous thought. But Bifla really did it, and it was so easy. Even Ruik Des was surprised. Could it be that the modification experiment really caused such a strange change to the 2 of them? But even so, they couldn't increase the power of the guns, right? No matter how strong their bodies were, they couldn't change the power of the guns. Ruik Des was familiar with the 3 spiritualists who were killed instantly. They should be relatively outstanding spiritualists. But they died very unjustly. They were so easily shot in the head. Could it be that their guns had been modified? And the 3 spiritualists underestimated the enemy? That should be the most reasonable explanation. But even so, the surrounding spiritualists still looked serious. The spiritualists who originally wanted to step forward to stop them couldn't help but take a step back. Obviously, they weren't ready to die. Mato Shinji had been observing the situation ever since she was freed. The appearance of Chen and Bifla was out of everyone's expectations. And Mato Shinji knew how powerful the three spiritualists who were killed were. More accurately, how terrifying and strange they were. For Mato Shinji, magic was full of strangeness and uncertainty, but Bifla killed them with the most ordinary gun. This made Mato Shinji a little dazed. Just then, a body shining with golden light blocked in front of everyone. This person looked like his skin was plated with a layer of gold. "Let me try your gun," the golden-skinned man said. Bifla put down his gun. The golden-skinned man revealed a proud smile. He seemed to think that his invincible Vajra body had scared the other party. Bifla glanced at Chen. Chen suddenly took a step forward. Without giving his opponent a chance to react, Chen punched him in the stomach. The golden-skinned man clutched his stomach and fell to the ground, spittle flying everywhere. Ruik Des widened his eyes suddenly. How could this be? That was a variant of the enhancers of the West Asian region. It could also be called the metal strengthening system. That person was using the body of gold. Gold itself had an extremely strong resistance to attacks. Furthermore, it had excellent plasticity and toughness. He was extraordinarily strong. However, the metal enhancement spiritualist was killed by Chen's punch. After taking care of this metal strengthening major, Chen Zhao turned to look at Ruik Des. "Mr. Sanders, don't disappoint us." Ruik snorted coldly, but Chen's words still ignited his competitive spirit. Ruik Des's arms hung low, his body rippling with magic power like a raging wave. At this moment, the rain in the sky stopped. The ground quickly began to dry up. A moment ago it had been a swamp. The next moment it had become dry and cracked land. A gust of night wind blew, bringing up a cloud of sand. "Damn, he's using a super large-scale spell." Everyone was shocked. This was a large-scale spell, which meant that the consequences would be extremely terrifying. The wind grew stronger and stronger, sweeping up waves of sand. The sandstorm obscured everyone's vision. Cough, cough. "Bastard. The sandstorm is too strong. We have to leave this area. Or else we'll all be swallowed by the sandstorm." However, right at that moment, within the range of the sandstorm, figures appeared one after another. These figures were all condensed from the sand. Chen and Bifla stood on a steep slope with Mato Shinji. Apart from Mato, Chen and Bifla watched the battle with the attitude of watching a show. "What spell is this?" "Sandhell's Sandstorm," Bifla said. "It's a type of ancient Egyptian spell. Nowadays, very few spiritualists can use it. It has a large range, but it's not powerful enough. This spell isn't good at killing. It's used to harass and hinder the opponent's movements," Bifla said. "And you said it's not powerful enough. That's for us. For those guys, it can still cause quite a bit of trouble." Just as Bifla said, the Sandmen began to attack all living things in their range of activity. The ground turned from swamp to sand, and the environment from wet to dry. The ones who were affected the most weren't the spiritualists, but the swamp people and their descendants. The swamp people were used to wet environments, and the desert was the most beautiful place they were unwilling to approach. The large number of Sandmen surrounded the swamp people first. They might not be the strongest, but they were very troublesome. Also, the Sandman's intention wasn't to use this spell to directly cause casualties. His real goal was to stop Day from escaping. But these Sandmen weren't very powerful. Even the lowest level spell could shatter them. But they were like cockroaches that couldn't be killed. No matter how many times their bodies were shattered, they could always reform and stand up to fight again. "No, we can't continue. We have to find a way to get out of this area. The water in my body is quickly evaporating." The true function of this sandstorm area was to constantly absorb the water of all the plants and animals around it. The human body was mostly liquid, so Ruik Des could easily deprive the enemy spiritualists of their water. Most of the time, the human body would store a certain amount of water, but this stored water was easily digested, or turned into sweat and evaporated. Once the water content in the body dropped to a certain level, a person's ability to move and think would plummet. It was the same for spiritualists. Once their body felt uncomfortable, their combat power and magic power would decrease. And this was only the first stage. The second stage was when their lives began to be in danger. Once enveloped by the sandstorm, as the water content decreased, the body's functions would decline overall. This was like a dangerous area in a game. Once a player entered a certain area, their health would begin to drop. This spell looks powerful. If I stand in it, the water in my body will also be absorbed. Chapter 2209. Mato Shinji could not hear the conversation between Chen Zhao and Baifla. She was already astonished by Ruik De's miraculous power. Turning an entire swamp into a desert was something only a god could do. The man in glasses adjusted his glasses, his eyes serious. Trouble. Big trouble. The man in glasses was good at data analysis. He was not a battle-type spiritualist. His magic was similar to finding weaknesses. His brain would operate at high speed and come up with the best plan of action. However, this plan was not the best in the true sense. This was because it was a combination of all known data and factors. If the enemy had hidden or unexposed information and data, the man in glasses would not know and would not be able to integrate it into the plan. This was the situation for the man in glasses. Ruik Des had cast a new spell, one that had never been used before. This caught the man in glasses off guard. He knew Ruik Des and had fought with him many times. However, Ruik Des had never used this spell. Ruik Des should have mastered death magic and alchemy magic. He had never used this ancient spell. All he knew was that this spell wasn't owned by Ruik Des. It was given by the Ring of Restlessness. This made the man's desire for the Ring of Restlessness even stronger. He felt that only he was worthy of the Ring of Restlessness. The Ring of Restlessness, coupled with the magic he had now mastered, could make up for his shortcomings. At the same time, it would show the true power of the Ring of Restlessness. But the first thing he had to face was the power of the Ring of Restlessness. The magic power of 10 of the most powerful spiritualists in ancient Egypt. And the magic they had. Medusa. Use your fog magic, hurry. Koit, use heavy rain. Daily. Use wind magic to blow in the opposite direction. Terry, Tony, you guys can go all out now. The man in glasses quickly arranged and gave orders. They were all in the stage of water shortage. If they could not solve this problem soon, they might suffer from heat exhaustion. Spiritualists could not get sick. In fact, spiritualists could also get sick in an extremely short and harsh environment. Once they got sick, it would be extremely serious. Even if it was just heat exhaustion, it would be very serious. If a spiritualist fell ill, it could mean that the magic in their body was in disorder. Back then, when Chen Zhao devoured other people's magic power, his magic power became chaotic, and he developed a magic allergy. This was the same example. Looks like Ruik Des didn't have an absolute advantage, even with the divine artifact. That person is very good at deployment and strategy, Chen Zhao said. Obviously, it was the command of the bespectacled man that stabilized the chaotic situation. The rain suddenly fell from the sky, and at the same time, it was shrouded in dense fog. In the opposite direction of the sandstorm, the strong wind swept up the torrential rain, whistling towards the sandstorm. With the nourishment of the rain, the adverse reactions of the spiritualists were alleviated. The Sandman also melted and disintegrated after coming into contact with the rain. This is not enough, far from enough. Baifla shook his head. The power of the Ring of Restlessness is far greater than this. Sure enough, seeing that the situation was actually stabilized, Ruik Des immediately released a second spell. Voodoo. Disorder. Ruik Des's magic seeped into the dark clouds in the sky. The rain falling from the sky turned purple. Everyone, use your magic shields. Quick, quick. The bespectacled man shouted. Most spiritualists had magic shields, but not everyone had them. When some spiritualists touched the purple rain, they started going crazy and attacking their companions uncontrollably. They had never seen such a large-scale curse before. The bespectacled man's expression was serious. Fardu, use holy light magic to purify the curse on them. It's useless. My holy light purification doesn't work on them. This is an ancient Egyptian pollution curse. Holy light magic is useless against it. I need spiritual purification. Spiritual magic was already very rare, let alone spiritual purification. It was 1 in a million. It was even more impossible for any of them to have such a magic element. What do we do? The bespectacled man was also very lost. Facing his teammates' questions, he didn't know what to do either. He had many plans in his mind, but each plan required a certain price. For example, giving up on the cursed companions. But the consequences were equally severe. If he met these companions on the battlefield, no one would say anything even if he killed them. But now they were on the same side. They weren't enemies. If he used his butcher knife on his companions, then he would be despised by everyone, including his teammates. What should he do? He also wanted to ask someone what to do. In the end, his gaze drifted to where Chen Zhao, Bifla, and Mato Shinji were hiding. In fact, the three didn't intend to hide at all. They just stood on a small slope and looked down at the battlefield. Go and capture those three. They're our only chance, the bespectacled man said. The situation was already very tense, but he still needed to split up some people. The speed at which they captured Chen Zhao, Bifla, and Mato Shinji would determine their success or failure. They're here. Mato Shinji's body immediately tensed. She turned to look at Chen Zhao and Bifla. She realized that one of them was sitting on a rock, and the other was leaning against a tree. It was as if they didn't see the people charging up. The first to reach the slope was an enhancement spiritualist. But before he could say his lines, Chen Zhao kicked him and sent him rolling down the slope. Your opponents are over there, not here. If you think you can get an advantage from us, you'll be disappointed. Of course, Chen Zhao's words couldn't dispel their intentions. Therefore, they continued to charge forward aggressively. A fireball shot toward Chen Zhao's face. But before it could touch Chen Zhao, it suddenly disappeared. Mato Shinji's expression changed slightly. Chen Zhao and Bifla were both fighting at close range. No matter how strong they were, Mato Shinji felt that it was natural. But she sharply sensed the disappearance of the fireball. Chen Zhao's abnormality. Cough cough, Bifla coughed softly. Chen Zhao also realized that he'd made a mistake. It wasn't just Mato Shinji who noticed. In the distance, Ruik Des saw it too. Chen Zhao and Bifla weren't the assassins he thought they were. At least, they weren't just assassins. 9 Heavens Divine King. Chapter 22:10. Instead, Ruik walked toward the slope. Compared to the glasses man and the others, it was more dangerous for Mato Shinji to stay with Chen Zhao and Bifla. She would only be truly safe when she was beside him. Mato Shinji also consciously moved away from Chen Zhao and Bifla. You lost. You exposed yourself first, Bifla said. Fine. Chen Zhao couldn't deny it no matter how shameless he was. He had lost this round. The non-elemental constitution had exposed his background. For the glasses man, this was an extremely bad situation. Ruik Des alone was already difficult for them to handle. Now, he realized that Ruik Des's 2 subordinates were also very strong. However, Ruik Des gave up on them. Instead, he turned to Chen Zhao and Bifla. Suddenly, Ruik Des attacked without any warning. His first move was a ray of black light. The black light was a black arrow. The black arrow shot toward Chen Zhao like a bolt of lightning. However, when the black arrow was a few inches away from Chen Zhao, it disintegrated and disappeared. Now Ruik Des could finally confirm. Chen Zhao wasn't an ordinary person. He was a spiritualist just like him. Who are you? Ruik Des stared at Chen Zhao and Bifla coldly. Guess. Smiling, Chen Zhao looked at Ruik Des. Ruik Des didn't know who Chen Zhao and Bifla were. However, he naturally thought that Chen Zhao and Bifla were people who had stolen the endless loop. It was just that the two had hidden themselves too well. Perhaps they were thinking that the mantis was stalking the cicada, unaware of the oriole behind. Ruik Des snorted coldly and reached out to grab at the void. A flaming spear appeared in his hand. Then he threw Chen Zhao with all his might. The flaming spear tore through the air. Chen Zhao reached out and the spear collided with his palm. Boom! Accompanied by an earth-shattering explosion. A shockwave comparable to a guided missile swept in all directions. However, after the explosion, Ruik Des was shocked to find that Chen Zhao was unharmed. The sun spear that he had confidently thrown actually couldn't harm Chen Zhao at all. Disbelief was written all over his face. Alright, let's go, Bifla said. He could tell that Chen Zhao was getting serious. If Chen Zhao intervened, it would be unfair to either side. Chen Zhao's combat ability was comparable to Zhang Tianyi's. If Chen Zhao wanted to attack Zhang Tianyi, he would have no objections. But to Ruick Dale's, or the glasses man's side, it seemed like they were bullying the weak. Mr. Ruick, I had a great time with you. We'll be leaving now. I hope we can meet again. Smiling, Chen Zhao clapped his hands. Narrowing his eyes, Ruick looked at Chen Zhao and Bifla, who had really turned to leave. He was hesitating whether he should stop the two of them. However, before he could make a decision, Chen Zhao and Bifla had already blended into the darkness. It was difficult to find them again. Ruick's eyelids twitched. The strength of those two guys was not to be underestimated. If the two of them joined forces with the bespectacled man, and the others to deal with him, he would really be in big trouble. In fact, if Chen Zhao and Bifla hadn't attacked earlier, and allowed the bespectacled man and the others to hold Mato Shinji hostage, he would also be helpless. But even though they'd saved Mato Shinji, Ruick didn't think that they had good intentions. He felt that they'd retreated voluntarily, because he'd discovered their identities. They'd retreated not because they had no ill intentions, but because they couldn't do anything to him. Nevertheless, their departure was a good thing for Ruick Dales. This way, he could focus on the bespectacled man and his accomplices. Of course, this time, he wouldn't let anyone threaten Mato Shinji's safety. Bifla, what do you think is going on with Mato Shinji and Ruick Dales? The world pursues immortality. In the magic era, magic was what they researched, or technology is what they are researching now. But no matter what method they use, the goal is the same. For example, I'm a good example. By seizing the physical body of others, I can continue on the spiritual level. Bifla said, actually, the reproduction of living things is also a way of extending oneself. It's also a way of extending oneself, but Ruick Des is different. He uses an even more unconventional method of extending himself. In the supernatural world, this method is called soul reproduction. And this method is actually very different from the most common method of reproduction between the sexes in nature. The process of soul reproduction is more complicated, and at least from a technical point of view, most people can't do this. Then how exactly do you do it? How would I know? I've never learned this kind of magic. There are probably less than 10 people in the world who know it, and probably only Ruick Dales dares to claim to be proficient in it. That rare? Is it very difficult to learn? It's not because it's difficult, but because the origin of soul reproduction is the magic system of ancient Egypt. Eunuchs didn't first appear in China, but in ancient Egypt. Because eunuchs served the pharaohs, they could be said to be their spokespersons. They had very high power and status, but because they couldn't reproduce, the spell of soul reproduction was born. To put it simply, spiritualists back then created soul reproduction to serve the powerful class of eunuchs. When they returned to the hotel, Chen Zhao and Bifla hurried back to their rooms. After all, they'd lived under the graveyard for 2 days. It wasn't a good feeling. After washing up, Chen Zhao knocked on Bifla's door in a relaxed manner. At the same time, Chen Zhao tossed a prepared gift box on Bifla's table. This is what I lost to you. Chen Zhao and Bifla didn't have a bet. Nevertheless, Chen Zhao was willing to admit defeat in this competition. Do you want to go eat something together? Bifla happily accepted Chen Zhao's invitation. In the restaurant, Chen Zhao and Bifla chose a seat by the window. Because of the time, there was no one in the restaurant at the moment. But in a 5-star hotel, all the shops were open 24 hours a day. However, the restaurant looked rather empty. Apart from Chen Zhao and Bifla, there were only 2 waiters working overtime to serve them. Bifla opened the gift box and glanced at it. Is this a dragon eye? What breed? Bifla asked. The dragon eye had gone through simple magic processing. It had originally been dozens of centimeters long, but now it was only the size of 2 fingers. Black dragons, Chen Zhao said. This thing wasn't valuable to Chen Zhao, but to other people and even Bifla, it was a very rare treasure. Bifla didn't reject it hypocritically. Without another word, he closed the box and put it away. Tell me, what do you want from me? Chapter 22:11. What's up with your super perception? This was Chen's only motive for Bifla. Over the past few days, Chen Xian had been studying Bifla. He wanted to know what method or magic Bifla used to obtain such a powerful perception. Bifla closed the gift box and tossed it back to Chen. This isn't enough. What do you need? Shangqing realm perception, Bifla said. You have a big appetite, but I'm the one who's at a disadvantage. Although your magic is very rare, I can still find other people or similar methods. However, there are only a handful of people in this world who have mastered the Shangqing state, and each of them has their own unique insights. Everyone's insights are priceless, so I'm the one who's at a disadvantage. Bifla wasn't in a hurry to speak, even though he desired it very much. However, he still didn't speak. Whoever spoke first would be more important to the person. The price he would have to pay would be greater. Chen also cupped his fists and held his chin. He quietly waited for Bifla's reply. Bifla had the same attitude. After a while, Bifla finally spoke first. How about this? Other than telling you the trick of the perception spell, I'll promise you one more thing. As long as it doesn't endanger the fire worship sect, you can ask for anything. It'll be valid forever, Bifla said. I'll be there whenever you need me. It was already rare for someone as proud as Bifla to promise to be there whenever he was called. Chen rubbed his chin and considered Bifla's condition. Given Bifla's personality, this condition should be his bottom line. If Chen rejected it, he wouldn't ask for a greater price. Chen thought about it and said, Sure. Remember your words. I'll be there whenever you call me. I've never gone back on my promise, Bifla said calmly. That's for the best. Chen nodded. Bifla had a large business. Chen wasn't afraid that he would go back on his words. My Shangqing realm is divided into two parts. The first part is to obtain a small world, which is also a domain, Chen said. The small world is actually one with the entire world. When I obtained the small world, I felt that the entire world was actually a giant's meridians. Chen didn't hide anything. He told Bifla everything. Bifla was like a studious student. He greedily absorbed the knowledge Chen gave him. Only when Jen was done did Bifla speak up and ask his own question. Why do you think that the heaven and earth patterns are meridians? This should have something to do with my undergraduate profession. I'm a medical student. My first instinct was that it was meridians. There's no direct evidence. Bifla nodded, acknowledging Chen's answer. Then Bifla asked more questions. As a spiritualist below the Shangqing realm, Bifla could not really feel or understand it. However, this did not hinder his harvest. Some things could only be obtained through accumulation. For example, an epiphany. Although the epiphany happened in an instant, it still required a lot of sacrifices. A baby cannot suddenly understand quantum mechanics. In order to master those obscure things, one must first have a huge reserve of knowledge. It was the same with magic. Are you satisfied with my comprehension? Bifla nodded. Very satisfied. This is an unexpected harvest. Just like how Chen wouldn't hide his enlightenment, Bifla wouldn't purposely say that it was worthless just to lower the price. Then it's my turn, Bifla said. What's your understanding of perception? Perception is more like the feedback of the senses. Ordinary senses consist of 5 senses: hearing, sight, touch, taste, and smell. Spiritualists have one more. Through the release of magic power, they gain super senses. Bifla nodded. I don't need to explain your basic knowledge. Both you and I rely on super senses. Even your little world is a type of super senses. My perception is actually super senses, not magic. How is that possible? I feel that my little world's coverage is already larger than old Zhang's and 23rd Gen's combined. How can your super senses cover a larger area than mine? This is what I'm going to say next, Bifla said. Actually, there's another name for ESP, Bifla said. It's called psionic sense. Just like what you said, psionic sense is the release of magic power, and then feedback to the body to sense the changes in the outside world, or certain information. This kind of psionic sense is very similar to radar. Chen nodded, and didn't interrupt Bifla's explanation. My trick is to dilute the mana, and then disperse it. For example, a square kilometer needs 100 mana coverage to be able to sense it clearly. I divide this square kilometer into a square, and then place a small amount of mana in the 4 corners of the square. The mana in these four corners interacts and outlines a radar network. Wait, let me think. Chen interrupted Bifla's explanation and fell into deep thought. After a while, Chen spoke again. So you're saying that most spiritualists and I have the wrong way of sensing? I can't say that it's completely wrong. It's just that you haven't found the trick and technique. Also, to most spiritualists, their sensing range is very limited. The difference between 5 and 10 square meters is meaningless. They rely more on sight, hearing, smell, taste, and touch to sense the world. You and I are different. We have magic power that is hundreds or even thousands of times greater than normal spiritualists. That's why the difference in perception is reflected. Bifla paused for a second before continuing. Also, although my distributed sensing method can cover a wider area, it also has a shortcoming, which is that my perception isn't very clear. It's like the pixel ratio of a phone's camera function from 20 years ago. And your little world perception is the pixel ratio of a phone's camera function from 20 years later. I understand. It's sacrificing clarity in exchange for sensing limit. That's right. That's the logic. As long as you master this method, your sensing range can increase by dozens of times. If I have enough magic power, I can sense the entire city, right? Theoretically, of course, but do you have that much magic power? Chapter 22:12. On the other side, Ruik Des had also left the swamp with Mato Shinji. Mr. Des, why did they threaten you with me? Mato Shinji asked. Because you are my daughter. Ruik Des did not look at Mato Shinji, but walked forward. Mato Shinji's footsteps stopped, and she stood in place with a stunned expression. She looked at Ruik Des's back in a daze. This is impossible. We are completely different. Nationality, hair color, even our appearance. Although they were both white, they were not completely of the same race. Mato Shinji was more inclined to the Eastern European race, while Ruik Des was obviously of Latin American descent. It was impossible for anyone to think that they were father and daughter. We are not father and daughter in the traditional sense. Ruik Des stopped and turned his head. I've never wanted you to know about this. You're just a continuation of me. We're not related by blood, so you don't have to take it to heart. How can I not take it to heart? One day, someone suddenly told me that he was my father. No one would not mind, Madwa Shinji said emotionally, and even her voice was a lot louder. For you there will be no change. Ruik Des's tone was still calm. I'm not asking for any change now. I just want to know the truth. You are the child of my soul, Ruik Des said. I don't understand. You can think of it as another way to reproduce. What about my original parents? They are your parents, Ruik Des said. And my relationship with you is not accurate to say that we are father and daughter. It is more like a relative and also my heir, provided that you are willing. You mean I will inherit your identity in the future? Or your magic? Everything, including my identity. But I don't know magic at all. Just not now. As my relative, you have the same talent as me. Then can I be stronger than those two guys? Yes, Ruik Des said. What should I do? Those two guys were completely modified and even succeeded. Although they themselves are very special, I still managed to obtain a lot of data from their modifications. As long as there are enough materials, I can concoct an even more perfect enhancement potion. This is also what you need now. Stronger and safer. Will I be able to surpass them after undergoing the modification experiment of the perfect enhancement potion? No, they're like me. We're both spiritualists. If we only surpass them in terms of strength, we won't be able to defeat them. Ruik Des said. If you want to surpass them, you can only surpass them in all aspects, in both strength and magic. But I don't have any magic foundation right now. As long as you are prepared, you can gain magical power at any time. Where did the magic power come from? You and my ancestors. Before you and me, there were many servants of the pharaoh, who like me passed down their inheritance as relatives. In the future, you will also pass down your inheritance in the same way. They also left behind a lot of property, and only you as a relative are qualified to see it. Ruik Des said. Madwa Shinji quickly accepted her identity. She did not reject this identity. On the contrary, she felt that this identity was easier to accept. At the same time, it made her even more happy. She was finally no longer just an ordinary person. She could stand next to Ruick Dales in a more intimate capacity. Now I'll take you to the new base to rest. Tonight, I'll show you the real world of magic, a world that only exists in fantasy. Wendy, are you ready? Zhang Tianyi came to Wendy's side. Wendy opened his eyes lazily and nodded slightly. He looked tired and sleepy, as if he hadn't had enough sleep. Then let's start the second trial, Zhang Tianyi said. I hope the lunatics from the Hermit Order won't appear. They will appear, Wendy said. Their plan is very simple, Wendy said. They pretended to be clever and misled us, hoping that we would mistakenly think that their goal was the manufacturing method of the Anubis construct. In fact, their goal was the Star of Brilliance, and to create chaos. Are you sure their goal is the Star of Brilliance? And not to mislead us again? It's not difficult to guess their goal. Everyone knows that the Star of Brilliance is in my hands. And a few years ago, the chairman of the Hermit Order met with an accident while modifying himself, causing his mana source to collapse. Now that he needs a new mana source, the Star of Brilliance is their only choice. If that's the case, why don't you leave the Star of Brilliance with me for now? I guarantee that no one will be able to take it away. Wendy glanced at Zhang Tianyi, then silently closed his eyes and said nothing else. Stingy. Zhang Tianyi curled his lips. Wendy did not continue the conversation. If the item was left with Zhang Tianyi, no one would be able to take it away. But the problem was, would he return it to him? That was the ancient god artifact, the Star of Brilliance. It possessed unlimited mana, and the user could even have a small world similar to a domain. To anyone, it was a priceless treasure. That was why Wendy would never leave it with Zhang Tianyi for safekeeping. From a certain point of view, Zhang Tianyi was even more of a bastard than those lunatics from the Hermit Order. Forget it. I'll deal with those bastards from the Hermit Order. You just need to focus on the second trial. As long as you're by my side, the people from the Hermit Order won't appear, and the most likely method they'll use is to lure you away from me, then ambush me. Then what do you think? If they want to lure the tiger away from the mountain, then let's do as they wish. That's too risky. Even if you're strong, you're still not strong enough, Zhang Tianyi said. As the world's #1 alchemist, Wendy's strength was unquestionable. Even if he wasn't an expert in combat, his level was still there. Dealing with a bunch of elementary school students wasn't a problem. As long as it wasn't Zhang Tianyi, or the 23rd generation, Wendy was confident that he could go against the people from the Hermit Order. And even if he couldn't win, he couldn't be defeated either. Wendy was first and foremost a spirit controller, so most spells that could cause diseases and curses would be ineffective against him. Not to mention, he still had the Star of Brilliance. Chapter 22:13. Why can't I sense further with your method? Chen Zhao asked, confused. At most, I can sense 10 times the range. Any further and it'll get messed up. It seemed that Chen Zhao's perception range had increased by 10 times. It seemed like a huge range, but in reality, it only increased by 2 times. Compared to Bifla's perception, the difference was too huge. Back then, Bifla could see everything that happened more than 10 kilometers away. Chen Zhao couldn't help but wonder if Bifla had told him the real trick. This is a normal person's world, Bifla said. There are thousands of them in every square kilometer. When their auras are mixed together, they'll mess up your magic power. So, it's already very impressive that your perception range increased by 10 times. I'll take that as a compliment. Bifla glanced at Chen Zhao. He didn't play along with his narcissism. Instead, he continued, I can sense a wider range because I'm in the desolate market. There aren't many normal people to disturb me. There are at most a few spiritualists in a square kilometer. Their auras are more obvious and easier for you to sense. In other words, the trick of this perception spell is that normal people are more hidden and harder to detect, while spiritualists are easier to detect. You can say that. Of course, if there aren't many, you can still sense them. But if you want to use this spell to find a normal person in a certain range, it'll be very difficult. When will the desolate market open again? I plan to try it in the market. Tonight. Bifla glanced at the time. There's less than 3 hours until the second opening. Just then Bifla's phone rang. After a call, Bifla put down the phone and said, "Our tickets have been changed." "What do you mean?" "The first ticket to the Wasteland Fair was to use the blood of those criminal groups to open the entrance. This time, to open the entrance, we need the blood of a specific target." "A specific target?" "The organizer found a group of professional killers in Istanbul. We need to find and kill them, and then extract their blood." "I'm starting to suspect that the organizers are using us to kill their targets," Chen Zhao said, annoyed. "I hope they won't ask us to kill some politician." "You said that the organizers are using us to gain some benefits." "I don't doubt that. Anyway, they have a history of doing that," Bifla said. "But do you think they really dare to let us kill some politicians? Let's not talk about whether we can do it or not. As long as they dare to make this request, they will probably enter the hunting blacklist first. The 3 chairmen of Holy Glory all have big families and businesses. They don't have the courage to joke around with their family business." "But how do we find the assassins you mentioned? Do you have any clues?" Kelly had always believed that flags shouldn't be raised randomly. Take herself for example. Back then, she thought that she had accumulated enough money to retire from the assassin world. But in reality, she rested for 2 years, and then all her savings were depleted. In the past, she had only calculated the consumption power of ordinary people. She had obviously underestimated her desire to buy. With her vision from 2 years ago, the money she had saved up was definitely a huge sum. But today, 2 years later, she found that the prices of goods were really fucking expensive. Even a supercar could make her bankrupt. This forced her to return to the world. This time, she came to Istanbul because she had received a mission. The reward for this mission was very, very generous. It was so generous that she could rest for a few years after this mission. Of course, compared to the generous reward for revenge, the difficulty of this quest could be considered epic. She also heard that many assassins had come to Istanbul. They were all here for this mission. 2 young girls followed behind Kelly. Don't be fooled by the fact that they were underage. They were already professional killers. The 2 girls had been in the industry for at least 3 years. Of course, for famous assassins like Kelly, they were still low-level assassins. Nominally, they were Kelly's assistants and followed her. But in reality, their main function was to follow her. For example, carrying luggage was their main task. "Miss Kelly, please wait for us." The 2 followers hurriedly followed Kelly's footsteps. Kelly left in a carefree manner. Other than her handbag, she had nothing else with her. On the other hand, the 2 young girls were dragging 7 or 8 stacked suitcases. Kelly acted like she didn't hear the 2 girls' voices. She continued to walk with a murderous look. "Hurry up. After all, we are not the only team for this mission. There are quite a few other teams who have accepted this mission. Why did I agree to bring you guys here?" Kelly had started to regret it. Although they were quite good followers, in Kelly's eyes, they were still a burden. But in Kelly's eyes, they were still a burden. Suddenly, Kelly stopped and took off her goggles. Suddenly, Kelly stopped and took off her sunglasses. There were 2 people sitting on the waiting chairs in front of her. One of them looked like a person from Central Asia. The other one left a deep impression on Kelly. Even the person who changed Kelly's life plan. The man with the strange power. Just then, the man noticed Kelly's gaze. He turned around and looked at Kelly. "Miss Kelly, is that man greeting you? Looks like he's attracted by Miss Kelly's beauty." Chen Zhao was also surprised to see Kelly here. However, after a moment of daze, he felt that it was natural. Chen Zhao waved at Kelly. "Miss Kelly, let me go get rid of him," one of the girls said. However, Kelly walked straight to Chen Zhao as if she didn't hear her. "Hi Kelly, long time no see." Bifla looked Kelly up and down. "Is this woman a killer?" Kelly looked at Bifla in surprise, and then at Chen Zhao. There was a questioning look in her eyes. "Chen, I didn't expect to see you here." "I didn't either," Chen Zhao said, smiling. "Did you come to Istanbul for sightseeing? Or work? Are you waiting for someone here?" "I'm participating in an event," Chen Zhao said calmly. "The organizer found a group of killers for me and my colleagues to kill." Kelly's hair stood on end. Her limbs were completely cold. "Chen, is that true? If I were you, I'd buy a plane ticket and run right now." Chapter 22:14. Who are you? How dare you talk to Miss Kelly like that? The two girls behind Kelly jumped out and pointed at Chen Zhao. He pointed at Chen Zhao and shouted. It seemed that he was still too young and arrogant. Miss Kelly, are they in the same line of work as us? Do you want me to kill them now? Kelly rubbed her forehead. This is none of your business. Leave. The two girls were still unwilling. They glared at Chen Zhao and Bifla. Then what are you doing here? Kelly looked at Chen Zhao. Hunting. You're one of our prey. Of course, due to our past relationship, I'll let you live. Are you serious? Of course. Do I look like I'm joking? What if I reject your request? Kelly's body tensed up. She didn't know what Chen Zhao would do. She even felt that there was something wrong with the information Chen Zhao had provided. They were all assassins. Professional assassins. And the best kind. What kind of person would treat them as prey? Wasn't he afraid of shooting himself in the foot? Since you don't want to leave, it's better to die in my hands than in someone else's hands. Don't you think so? Kelly's expression darkened. She aimed her bag at Chen Zhao. What do you think is in my bag? The two girls also took out their weapons. One of the girls took out a transparent and thin metal wire. If it was wrapped around someone's neck, it could cut open their throat. Moreover, it could easily be taken through security. The other girl used a hair clip. With a few folds, her hair clip turned into a sharp dagger. It wasn't made of metal, but in terms of damage, it was no different from a metal dagger. They were young, but they'd been in the industry for at least 3 years. They were used to killing. They were also very familiar with their jobs. Chun, I don't really want to be your enemy, but that doesn't mean I'll let myself be captured. Chen Zhao looked at Kelly, wondering if he should just kill her. After all, Kelly was the first person who'd made him experience death. After that, no one could bring him to the brink of death. Of course, if it was the current Chen Zhao, he'd probably make her taste like a human can. But it had been a long time. Chen Zhao didn't have any other feelings for Kelly. What's more, they even had a conversation after that. At least, Chen Zhao didn't treat her as an enemy. He didn't want her to be treated like a human can. Fine, this is my advice to you. If you don't want to listen, then forget it. Also, there's nothing in your bag, so you don't have to pretend in front of me. Chen Zhao shrugged. Chun, if you don't want to kill them, let's change targets. I found 2 more prey. They just came out of the airport, Bifla urged. Well, I wish you a pleasant holiday in Istanbul. Chen Zhao got up and left with Bifla. Kelly and her 2 minions got into the rental car. Miss Kelly, why didn't you let us kill those 2 guys directly? You guys can't beat him, even if I join you. Kelly calmly said. Also, don't release your murderous aura so easily, especially to strangers. You don't know what you're facing. Kelly's gaze suddenly shifted to the side. She reached out and turned the rearview mirror slightly. Miss Kelly, what's wrong? We're being followed. Kelly's expression changed slightly. She didn't turn around directly, because she didn't want the people in the car behind to know that they'd already discovered that they were being followed. We're being followed. Is it those 2 guys? I told you that they're up to no good. They must have thought that there were too many people at the airport, so they waited until we left before following us. Hiss hiss. Just then, the playback function in their car suddenly emitted an electric noise. Then a human voice came from the function. Bugs, we're glad that you've entered our hunting ground. Now you can enjoy the process of being hunted. The sound coming from the player carried a strong electric current, which made people very uncomfortable to listen to. Miss Kelly, this is? Is it a prank? Suddenly, Kelly realized that all the cars on the road had disappeared. The entire road was pitch black. Not a single car could be seen. This should be the main road between the airport and the city. There should be no cars here. Moreover, there were many cars in front and behind them. Why did all the cars suddenly disappear? Even the car that was following them had disappeared. Now please turn right at the intersection ahead. I've prepared a place for you there. The noisy electric noise came from the player again. Idiot. Does this guy really think we'll listen to him? As they spoke, they saw an intersection in front of them. The 3 in the car obviously didn't plan to turn into that intersection. But at this moment, the 3 in the car suddenly heard a dull sound. Flat tire. The girl in the driver's seat didn't have time to react before the car lost control and rushed into the intersection. Damn it! Brake! Brake! Hit the brake! After twisting and turning for more than 30 meters, the car finally stopped after crashing into the guardrail. Ivy, you're too slow. You should have hit the brake when the tire burst. Caroline, I already hit the brake, but there was no response. What do we do now? Call someone to pick us up. Kelly took out her phone, but there was no signal at all. Do you have signal on your phones? Mine isn't. Mine isn't either. Let's go to the intersection and wait for the passing cars. Intersection. The three turned in the direction of the intersection, but they realized that it was a straight road. There was no intersection at all. What's going on? Didn't the car just pass the intersection? Why can't we see the intersection? Kelly frowned. She faintly sensed that something was amiss. Let's go back. Kelly immediately made a decision. Then what about our luggage? Leave it here first. When we return to the city, find someone to help us take it. For now, bring your weapons. At this moment, the two girls had no choice but to follow behind Kelly. But after walking for a long time, there was still no intersection. They were still on a straight road. Apart from the dense forest, there were no other cars or buildings along the way. Chapter 22:15. They didn't know how long they'd been walking, but they still didn't see anyone. There wasn't even a car along the way. This abnormal situation made their hearts skip a beat. Miss Kelly, do you know what's going on? Kelly's expression had always been very serious, because she suspected that it was Chen Zhao, or someone like him who was behind this. Plus, Chen Zhao had already said it. They'd been tricked into becoming prey. Kelly recalled how she'd met Chen Zhao. She'd shot Chen Zhao in the head, and then miraculously revived. Moreover, he'd ordered a terrifying monster to attack her. From then on, Kelly knew that there was something in this world that she couldn't understand. Clearly, Chen Zhao was one of those who couldn't understand. What they were going through now was probably also something they couldn't understand. Chen Zhao was still a suspect, but he wasn't very likely. At least, Kelly didn't think it was Chen Zhao through her analysis. Kelly hadn't interacted with Chen Zhao much, but she had a certain level of understanding. If Chen Zhao really wanted to harm her, he wouldn't have to be so sneaky. He definitely had the ability to end it directly. Even now, Kelly still couldn't understand Chen Zhao's strange methods. She couldn't break or block it. What should she do? This was a very heavy question. If she and her two followers encountered someone like Chen Zhao, how would she deal with it? Just then, a strange ringtone came from Kelly's phone. It was a bone-chilling laugh. Kelly was sure that her phone definitely hadn't been set to such a creepy ringtone. But now her phone really made such a sound. Kelly picked up her phone. There was still no signal on the screen. Evelyn and Aller both came over. Kelly looked at the caller ID. After a moment of hesitation, she still picked up the hands-free call. Hee, are you guys lost? The strange voice she'd heard in the car came again. Who are you? Kelly asked. You don't have the right to know my identity. You can only do as I say now. Otherwise, you'll be forever trapped on that endless path. All three women heard what the person on the phone said. The three girls looked at each other. The path will always come to an end. There's no path that can't be reached. Haha. Do you really think so? If that's the case, then our conversation ends here. You can die of exhaustion on that road. Wait, what do you want us to do? Kelly asked immediately. If they continued on this path, they might really break down. As a matter of fact, Kelly was only pretending to be calm. In fact, she was very frustrated. However, with her two followers by her side, she couldn't show it. At this moment, they were suppressing their emotions. Their mental fortitude was not as good as Kelly's. Therefore, all the agitation and uneasiness were written on his face. If they didn't change, they might go crazy first. Therefore, she would rather choose to face danger now. It was not an unchanging silence. About 1 kilometer in front of you, there is a turning path. Follow the path, and you will soon meet your opponents. Opponent? Do you want us to kill them? Hehe. If you can do it, then go ahead and kill them. If we kill our opponents, will they let us go? If I'm satisfied with your performance, it's not impossible to let you go. Another turning path. They didn't have a good impression of turning paths. However, at this moment, they could only accept this condition. Soon they saw the turning path. It was a path leading into the forest. The path was very muddy and difficult to walk on. However, the three of them didn't care about the path under their feet. Instead, they were vigilant of their surroundings. However, after walking for half an hour, there was nothing except for the forest getting deeper and deeper. There's nothing here. Caroline was very tired now. At the same time, her emotions were almost at their limit. However, in the next moment, a black shadow flashed past. It flew over Caroline's head. Before Kelly and Evelyn could react, Caroline fell to the ground. Her head fell to the ground. Her young life was gone forever. The black shadow didn't disappear. Instead, it landed not far away. It was a creature that looked like a lizard. Its slender and slimy body was about 4 to 5 meters long. However, it only had a pair of forelimbs and no hind limbs. However, it was very mobile. Its forelimbs were also very thick and long, even thicker than its main body. Its claws were incomparably sharp. It used its claws to cut off Caroline's head. Its 2 claws grabbed onto the tree branches on both sides and propped its body up. Under the night sky, the creature's body flickered with an unsettling light. A terrifying growl came from its bloody mouth. That. Evelyn was so frightened that her legs turned to jelly. She pointed at the 2-legged monster in horror. The 2-legged monster suddenly turned around, its slender tail sweeping towards Evelyn. Evelyn watched as the 2-legged monster's tail stabbed towards her. However, her legs didn't react at all, as if she couldn't control them. Suddenly, Evelyn was pulled to the ground by a force. Kelly had already tackled Evelyn to the ground. At the same time, she pulled out her gun and fired 2 shots at the 2-legged monster. The bullets hit the 2-legged monster's body. The 2-legged monster screamed in pain and hurriedly dodged. Kelly's mood didn't improve. Her gun had only made the 2-legged monster feel pain. She didn't truly injure it. That kind of despairing body, strength and speed that far surpassed that of a human's. Add to that its beast-like movement and defense that couldn't be damaged by guns. From there, it created an undefeatable monster. How were they going to defeat this monster? Miss Kelly, Caroline is dead. That monster will eat us all. We will die here. Evelyn's current performance was like that of an ordinary young girl. In fact, she was indeed a young girl. She had killing skills that ordinary girls didn't have. However, her mental fortitude wasn't much better than ordinary people. Her previous arrogance and calmness were merely a feeling of superiority brought about by her past experiences. When she faced an enemy that wouldn't care about her past, all of her arrogance would be gone. Calm down. If you really want to become like Caroline, you can just shout and scream. You're tuning in to the Limei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.